This is a story of humans who resist great and unreasonable threats. In a sunlit field, a heavily armored warrior stands amidst the carnage of his foes, splattering small, green-skinned creatures with overwhelming force. He is not alone in this future battle. A magenta-haired sorceress, 2 blonde-haired elves, and a young squire stand with him. But the story does not belong to the group. It belongs to him. His tale truly begins a few days prior. In a dark, enclosed space, a monstrous figure with white, segmented armor awakens, flexing its powerful hands with a heavy thud. As gloom settles around him, he grapples with a terrifying thought. He is a monster. He doesn't have a name for this new form, but he remembers his human name was Unos. His mind flashes back to a time when he was a normal human, unable to comprehend how he became a monster who couldn't even speak. He recalls a scientist with glasses proposing a solution, a gene-enhancing program, promising it would fill up soon. Returning to the present, he examines a nearby console. The information displayed is stark. The year is 1872 in the Northern Empire. The accuracy of the machine is paramount to understanding his situation. He remembers participating in the experiment when he was just 18, back in the year 1648. Surveying the dilapidated laboratory and its rows of cryogenic capsules, a horrifying realization dawns on him. He has been sleeping for 200 years. His gaze then falls upon a shattered capsule nearby. Inside rests the desiccated corpse of another subject, a grim testament to the fate of at least one other participant. He turns back to the console, his mind racing. If what the machine says is true, why was he left unattended for 2 centuries? And what became of his country, the Phloretic Empire? He dismisses the thoughts. It's no use worrying about things without any evidence. A new resolve forms as he looks towards a door, the first step out of this ruined laboratory. He resolved to find out what was happening outside and approach the door, giving it a firm push. The door remained shut. As he paused, his gaze fell upon the debris-strewn floor, where he spotted a usable matchstick. Only then did he fully register the grim reality of his surroundings. The place was littered with corpses. He grimaced, a bead of sweat forming on his armored brow. This was going to be troublesome. He confirmed his suspicion at the sealed gate. The facility's power was completely out, and the door wouldn't open. Realizing his new form was that of a muscular monster, he concluded this must be a test of pure strength. With a roar, he unleashed a powerful blow against the metal gate. The impact was immense, but the door held, and a sharp pain shot through his knuckles. He writhed on the floor, clutching his injured hand. Despite the pain, he gave himself a thumbs up, a silent vow not to fail his homeland. His gaze then fell upon one of the skeletons, and the truth settled in. If he couldn't get out this way, his only path forward was deeper into the underground facility. A surge of desperation fueled him. He refused to die in this place, to perish while trapped in a monster's body. He jammed his fingers into the seam of the door and began to pull with all his might, determined not to meet his end here. Suddenly, the strain vanished, replaced by a strange sense of relaxation. He paused, examining his hands and torso. To his surprise, despite the immense force he had exerted, there wasn't a single scratch on his armored skin. His gaze shifted from the impenetrable gate to the adjacent wall. A new thought occurred to him. If the gate itself was indestructible, perhaps the surrounding structure was not. He recalled a past remark as he dug his fingers into the seam where the wall met the doorframe. With a powerful grip, he began to pull. The structure groaned and creaked under the strain, the metal beginning to warp. He burst through the laboratory wall in an explosion of rock and debris. The scientist's experiment was, by all accounts, a success. Standing amidst the ruin, he realized with a jolt that the strength in a single one of his hands was enough to shatter a large boulder. Finding himself in a dense forest, a wave of relief washed over him. He was finally outside. This unparalleled physical strength, he mused, could even be used for climbing. His immediate priority was to understand his location. To do that, he knew he needed to find some high ground to get a clear view of the surrounding area. He began scaling a sheer cliff face, his powerful limbs finding purchase with ease. As he climbed, he came to a realization. His physical strength wasn't the only thing that had been enhanced. Upon reaching the summit, he prepared to survey the landscape. A faint light emanated from his eye as he focused, activating a function he identified as a magnification. He understood it to be an artificial eye, a function that allowed him to zoom in and see distant objects in clear, sharp detail. He confirmed to himself that this was correct. As he activated the function, a low, buzzing sound filled the air. His vision focused on a vast, gloomy forest on the horizon. He didn't think such a large forest existed within the Empire, which raised a troubling question about his true location. He then recalled another ability he'd been given, emotional suppression. This function automatically nullified feelings like fear and grief that could interfere with fighting. The memory of the scientist's goal, to turn humans into weapons, horrified him. Yet he had to admit that the resulting calm was disturbingly convenient. Rejecting this imposed purpose, he leaped from the cliff top, landing with a ground-shattering slam. Catching his breath, he made a vow. He would not become a weapon. Just then, a rhythmic thumping sound echoed through the trees. He looked toward the source of the noise and saw it. A colossal, downed airship resting silently in the forest. He found a flight log inside the wreckage, recognizing the script as belonging to the northern kingdom of Canaan. Flipping through the pages, he let out a sigh. His suspicions were confirmed. The log was dated a century ago. It detailed how a monster attack had brought the vessel down. He felt a small measure of relief for having been prepared to some extent. Considering the airship's speed and that it crashed on its third day out from Canaan, he could now deduce his approximate location. He then noticed he no longer felt hungry. The absence of this basic sensation was more unsettling than the hunger itself. To be safe, he forced himself to swallow some biscuits he had found. Having eaten, he decided on a course of action. Head east. He reasoned that he might find a town where he could gather information, believing that even a ruined settlement might still hold people. But as he considered this, a dark thought surfaced. He hoped any people he found wouldn't react to him with terror, recalling the screams of monster from his past. He held little hope. Suddenly, a foul stench assaulted his senses, causing him to recoil in disgust. He clutched at his face, overwhelmed and questioning the source of the horrible smell. He realized the source was close. Peeking through a thicket of bushes, he confirmed his suspicion as a sound came from just beyond the foliage. Beyond the bushes, a horde of small, screeching creatures swarmed through the clearing. Goblins. The goblins were not alone. They were in the midst of assaulting 2 female elves. He registered with a detached shock that this was the first time he had witnessed such a thing outside of stories. A wave of anger washed over him, and his fist clenched tightly as he remained concealed. He flexed his armored hand, already aware of his body's high specifications. The only question was how effective it would be against these creatures. With a surge of resolve, he decided it was time to find out. With that thought, he took a thunderous step forward, his immense weight shaking the forest floor. He descended upon the goblins in a blur of motion. With a savage greeting, he unleashed his fury, tearing through their ranks with brutal efficiency. The violence was overwhelming. He searched for a word to describe the scene. Slaughter, massacre, extinction, but none seemed adequate for the sheer totality of the destruction he wrought. He could only conclude that the scene was utterly hellish, a maelstrom of his own making. Standing in the quiet aftermath, surrounded by gore, he reflected on the nature of his opponents. They weren't formidable monsters, which explained why the confrontation had been such a messy, one-sided affair. As the black blood dripped from his claws, he had to admit he had gotten caught up in the moment. The sheer efficiency of the slaughter had been like achieving a perfect score in a game. A sudden gust of wind rustled the canopy above, and a sense of unease settled over him. As expected, he had gone too far. Elsewhere, over the rooftops of a nearby town, a weary sigh escaped into the air. The sigh came from a woman named Diara. Speaking to her armored companion, Liesel, he commented on her wealth. She dismissed his remark, telling him not to say such things and suggesting that if this recent event improved his rating, he might secure a better position. In a town square, a woman with long, reddish hair and a large witch's hat lets out a sigh. She complains that there is nothing of interest left to explore. She seems exasperated, while behind her, a young man in a suit of armor stares at her form, completely captivated. He breathes heavily, a blush spreading across his face as drool escapes his lips. Their moment is interrupted by the arrival of 2 others. A young woman with blonde hair calls out, "Gister." She's accompanied by a dark-haired man whom Gister addresses as her brother. The blonde woman, Lena, asks if it's true that Gister has taken charge of exploring the forest. Gister, meanwhile, teases her brother, telling him that if he becomes a better man, she might consider letting him hug her. She confirms to Lena that it is true, adding with a dismissive tone that she also doesn't want to hear about her big brother's own desire to explore. The scene then shifts, revealing the subject of their discussion, the great forest of Floridas. At the edge of the dense, imposing woods, the monstrous figure of Unos stands alone. Chaos erupts as a group of adventurers is overwhelmed. Gister is restrained, her face a mask of anguish, while Lena cries out in terror as small, goblin-like creatures swarm them, kicking and clawing. She grimaces, realizing with dawning horror how dire their situation is. They have truly drawn the short straw this time. Nearby, the brutal massacre of their party continues, the ground stained with blood. Amidst the violence, a different battle rages. The monstrous Unos lunges forward, his armored fist connecting with the side of a large reptilian beast's head. The impact is immense, shattering bone and sending a spray of dark blood from its jaw. Elsewhere in the fray, a large, bald warrior, his face splattered with gore, lets out a guttural roar as he tears a creature apart with his bare hands. Later, the heat of battle is replaced by the heat of a crackling fire. A large piece of meat, skewered on branches, sizzles over the flames. The monstrous victor, Unos, tears into the cooked flesh, devouring it ravenously. Yet, his expression suggests it is a disappointing meal. His disappointment quickly turns to disgust as he violently spits out the mouthful, declaring that it tastes like crap. He mutters that it's the alligator-like creature's own fault for attacking him first. He sits back, taking a long drink from canteen. He wonders if his taste buds are still the same as when he was human, or if the foul taste is because he failed to drain the creature's blood properly. He muses that if his body was going to be modified this much, it should have been done all the way. His thoughts then turn to his current predicament, which he voices to a small, gelatinous creature nearby. He explains the heavy shock of waking up as a monster, unable to even speak human language. He then picks up some canned rations, continuing his monologue. He acknowledges that even though he ended up like this, and doesn't truly get hungry, he still feels he ought to eat. Despite everything, he still wishes to live. He reflects on his human family, confident that his sisters survived whatever befell the Empire, noting their family's good genes. He imagines his father would have stayed behind to fight. A memory surfaces of a blonde woman, one of his sisters, embracing her young daughter, and he considers the possibility that he might one day meet one of their descendants. Despite this nostalgia, he flexes his new, powerful limbs, admitting to himself that he is a big fan of this supreme, muscular form. He also recalls a peculiar fact about his former self. He loved horror video games. His appreciation for his new body is tempered by a strong desire to interact with other humans. He briefly considers simply embracing his monster life, but the thought is fleeting. He concludes that he truly prefers to be human, musing that his current monstrous power combined with the ability to speak human languages would be the perfect situation. With this goal in mind, he sits by a campfire with his small slime companion, beginning to strategize. Assuming his homeland, the Flurit's Empire, is truly gone, he sets aside the language barrier for the moment and wonders which country he should approach to try and make friends. He recalls the might of his fallen nation. The Flurit's Empire was the largest and most powerful in the world, its strength rooted in its cutting-edge technology. This technological superiority was the very reason it could withstand fighting a war on 4 separate fronts for as long as it did. Considering the surrounding territories, he first thinks of a northern neighbor, the Kingdom of Canaan. He knows enough of their language to get by, and recalls that while they weren't as advanced as his empire, their half-baked blend of magic and technology wasn't too shabby. His thoughts then shift to another possibility, the Einhell Republic to the west. He knows it as an elf country, a place where the worship of nature is popular. He considers that since monsters are apparently considered a part of nature there, they might just accept him. Despite this potential upside, he remains concerned about the idea. His hesitation is due to the elves' specialization in magic. He decides it would be reckless to approach their lands without first determining if his monstrous body possesses any resistance to magic. A fleeting, irrelevant thought about the appearance of male elves crosses his mind before he refocuses. Having ruled out the west, he dismisses the south entirely. The Cyzelia Kingdom to the east is also a place he wants to avoid. He has heard they employ a special unit called the Exterminators to deal with large monsters, and he grimaces, realizing that he would be their #1 target. He decides on a course of action. For now, he will head north toward the Kingdom of Canaan, seeking a human settlement. His primary goal is to learn the lay of the land, and he resolves to move with great care to avoid any unwanted encounters with patrols from Cyzelia. His journey begins. For a brief, whimsical moment, he imagines himself planting a flag, but dismisses the silly thought. Suddenly, a distant roar cuts through the silence, putting him on alert. Elsewhere, a group of adventurers sits around a campfire. Gister's brother questions the purpose of their investigation, as they were only told to search for something. Gister grumbles in agreement, while Liesel attempts to cheer up a sullen Daila, telling her to look lively. Her brother elaborates on their mission, explaining that the territory of the old empire is now claimed by elves, a development from only 5 years prior. He expresses his irritation at this crap, noting how it gets on Gister's nerves given her known hatred for elves. Liesel speculates that their target must be deep within the old empire's lands, precisely because people avoid going there. He wonders aloud if some incredible treasure is hidden in the area. Lena suggests that this kind of adventure is fun, but Gister scoffs at the idea. She dismisses any potential treasure from the empire as science crap, declaring that those from Cyzelia, like them, hate science and have no use for it. In a sudden shift, Gister pulls Lena into a tight hug, calling her a cutie and telling her not to listen to her hard-headed brother. As Gister fawns over her, Liesel warns Lena to remain vigilant, reminding her of the danger. Lena, however, simply replies that it feels like a fun picnic. Daila gently pats Lena's head, her expression soft. She apologizes to Lena, acknowledging that she was only trying to brighten everyone's mood and shouldn't have had to put herself out like that. Overwhelmed by affection, Gister declares she can't handle Lena's cuteness and wants her as a little sister. Lena giggles that it tickles. Watching them, Gister's brother mutters about his little sisters, remarking how cringy it would be to actually say they should become one. The memory of those days, filled with laughter around the fire, felt as though it would last forever. A wistful thought surfaces, questioning why those happy times, lived so close to the edge of death, had to end. In the heat of battle, Liesel reels back in shock, his eyes wide with disbelief as a massive fiery explosion erupts against his armored torso. The force of the blast sends him hurtling backward. From a distance, Gister watches the chaos unfold, screaming his name in horror as goblins swarm around her. Meanwhile, Gister's brother carves a path through the horde, twisting and striking down the creatures. After felling one, he suddenly finds his path blocked by a hulking ogre. His confidence evaporates, replaced by fear as he curses the dire situation. Elsewhere, Lena calls out to Gister, warning that her brother is exhausted. Gister glares, surrounded by the bloody aftermath of her own fighting, trembling as she admits to herself she hadn't been careless. The goblin army's ogre leader grins, confident in his experience against such foes. She realizes her miscalculation was due to the ancient imperial ruins littering the battlefield, creating too many blind spots and complicating their defense. Her anxiety spikes with a dreadful memory. The anti-magic shield was taken by that idiot. As if on cue, a nearby goblin activates a swirling magical device, and the ogre's grin widens. She freezes, understanding that if her magic is nullified, they are doomed. The goblins seize the opportunity, laughing as they leap forward. One lunges for Lena, who gasps in terror, and Gister can only scream her friend's name as the horde descends. They are immediately overwhelmed. The creatures swarm Gister, tearing and stripping away her clothes as she struggles fruitlessly. Nearby, Lena cries out for them to stop as she suffers the same fate. Pinned to the ground, Gister weeps in despair, watching helplessly as the goblins assault Lena. She apologizes, heartbroken that she was unable to protect her. Her fear gives way to a grim resolve. Deciding she would rather die than become a goblin's plaything, she musters her final strength and unleashes a massive explosion from her own body. In a desolate, rocky landscape, a woman with dark hair finds herself surrounded by a pack of leering goblins. Her eyes widen in fear. Nearby, the massive, armored form of Unos rises, his heavy footsteps echoing. He looks upon the scene, bewildered, wondering what this towering creature could be. From his vantage point, he glares down at the chaotic gathering. The goblins swarm across the broken terrain, completely encircling the lone woman. The creatures close in, grabbing at her while shouting for her to get out of their way. Trapped, she demands to know what they are doing. Unos addresses the horde, his voice a low growl. He announces that he came to this place because it reeked of goblins, expressing surprise at finding humans present. His gaze sweeps across the carnage, settling on a fallen adventurer lying in a pool of blood. He notes that the man appears to still be alive. The goblins, however, are focused on their new captive. One points to the dark-haired woman, declaring that she makes their 7th victim and that they can do with her as they please. Without warning, Unos intervenes. He snatches a goblin by the head, its skull crunching in his grip. He demands to know what they are doing, roaring that they are blocking his view. He proceeds to toss the small creatures aside with ease. The woman gasps, utterly shocked that a monster is helping her and questioning if some monsters are hostile to goblins. Suddenly, a blast of energy erupts against Unos' back. He turns, unfazed, and identifies the attack as magic. He instantly spots the culprit, a goblin shaman. With a furious dash, Unos declares its final moment has come and smashes it into oblivion. The woman watches in horror as a small, spectral wisp emerges from the remains. She realizes with a start that it was the same magic that killed Liesel in a single blow. Yet this creature is still standing. Her shock at the creature's resilience was cut short by the arrival of a new, even more menacing figure. A hulking ogre, club in hand, flanked by goblins. The armored being, Unos, identified the ogre as the leader. Having only found low-level monsters until now, he saw this as a good opportunity. Clenching his fist, he decided to give it a try. The ogre was the first to act, leaping forward with a roar and bringing its massive club down directly onto Unos' head with a sickening thud. Watching from her bonds, the dark-haired woman recognized the attack was a direct blow, similar to the one that had sent her companion flying. She thought the situation looked very bad. Unos, however, merely scratched his head, completely unfazed by the impact as the goblin screeched in anticipation. He was completely disappointed. In a blur of motion, Unos twisted and delivered a devastating counterpunch to the ogre's torso. The force of the blow sent a shock wave through the cavern, stunning the onlookers. The ogre was launched into the air, its body erupting in a gruesome explosion of gore upon impact with the ground, leaving nothing but a bloody stain. Surveying the messy aftermath, Unos glanced at his fist, thinking he had done it again. He turned his attention from the terrified goblins to the captive woman, assuring her that she was safe now and didn't need to be afraid. He muttered to himself that this was not his true body, and that the truth would soon be revealed. He approached her and a young blonde girl she was protecting. He declared that as thanks for saving their lives, and since he needed to stay alive, he would take something useful. He spotted a potion and a knife, but then his eyes fell upon a sword. The dark-haired woman pleaded with him, saying he could take whatever he wanted, but not the sword. Unos simply apologized, explaining that he had no idea what she was trying to say. The language barrier between them was absolute, leaving the woman in a state of panicked desperation. She continued to plead, trying to convey that the sword was their team's proof of existence. A memory surfaced of her, smiling alongside her companions. The blonde girl, the dark-haired young man, and another woman with reddish-brown hair. Ignoring her cries, he turned and walked away with the sword. The woman shouted after him, vowing that monsters will always be monsters and that she would keep chasing him as long as he held their blade. Hearing her angry shouts, Unos mused that it was too bad they wouldn't meet again, but then considered that her vow had raised a reunion flag. He decided it was best to leave. Hunched over a meager fire in the wilderness, the reptilian monster is overcome with a wave of intense regret for its past actions. Elsewhere, Unos admires a gleaming sword he has taken. He realizes it is a magic sword, a rare and expensive weapon that consumes magical power to unleash special abilities. He is further astonished to discover that the blade can heal damage to his skin almost instantly. The thought of how much money such an artifact must be worth sends a jolt of panic through him. His thoughts drift to the woman he took it from. He recalls saving her life and had been looking forward to the possibility of forming a friendly relationship with her. Meanwhile, At a small house nestled in the woods, Gister lets out a weary sigh. She gazes toward the dwelling, wondering aloud if Diara is truly leaving. She turns to Lena, making a solemn promise to retrieve their sword and return. She instructs the young woman to wait there for her until she does. Overwhelmed with emotion, Lena cries out for Dionysian as Gister pulls her into a tight embrace. Still held close, Lena voices her deepest fear to the reddish-haired woman beside them. She is certain that if Nissen is also gone, she too will die, just like Gister. Gister comforts her, admitting that the idea of them going together had occurred to her. However, she refuses to end up like the others. She apologizes, explaining that the sole reason Lena must stay behind is simple. She doesn't want her to die. Her expression hardens with resolve. She states firmly that if Lena's fear is the reason she is giving up, then the two of them are fundamentally different. She screamed a final threat into the darkness, warning the monster to watch its back and wait for her. Far away, the reptilian creature, resting by a fire, felt a sudden sensation, wondering if someone was mentioning him. Her words faded into the night, beneath a vast, star-dusted sky where a crescent moon hung. Elsewhere, Unos continued his journey. He felt hungry, yet his new body showed no signs of drowsiness. It had been a long time since he had last slept or even blinked. The reptilian monster, meanwhile, considered his own state. Though he didn't feel tired, he couldn't dismiss the possibility that he needed rest. He resolved to treat it as night training and force himself to sleep. As the monster settled down, Unos' thoughts turned to practical needs. The backpack he'd taken, filled with potions, was already at its limit and too small. He decided he needed a bigger one, more salt for his tasteless meals, and maybe even a hot pot. The thought of finding a town to acquire these things spurred him onward. He traveled through the night until dawn broke, and at last, he found it. An abandoned town rising from the overgrown landscape. While exploring the ruins, his eyes caught a familiar piece of machinery. It was an anti-aircraft gun, and a wave of nostalgia washed over him. He had missed it. He recalled its significance. The anti-aircraft gun was the pride of the Floretic Empire, a marvel of science that successfully suppressed the winged monsters that plagued every other nation from skies. But this success had consequences. The monsters that escaped the empire fled to neighboring lands like Canaan, which quickly escalated into a diplomatic issue. The resulting conflict was the very cause of the war. With this history in mind, he examined his surroundings. A border town would have higher walls and more guns. The lack of them here suggested this was an inner town. He approached a wall, trying to read the name, but the letters were too faint to make out. He examines a weathered sign, struggling to decipher the faded text. He manages to make out the words, "I'll quid," and concludes he's on the northeastern side of the town. Having oriented himself, he consults a map, confirming his position at Alquil. He now knows his options. Heading northwest would take him a loop dill near the Canaan border, while heading east would lead to the old military base at Carnash Rock. He decides to begin his search for information right where he is. But as he prepares to move, a foul scent drifts towards him, and his face contorts in disgust. The stench grows stronger, emanating from a ruined archway nearby. A wave of pure hatred washes over him as he recognizes the source, a horde of pale, ghoulish creatures. The smell is so vile it halts his exploration before it can even begin. Without hesitation, he drops his pack and explodes into motion, charging directly at the creatures. His sudden assault catches the pale humanoids by surprise, their gleeful celebration turning to shock. He closes the distance in an instant, descending upon the terrified horde with a fist ready to strike. His punch lands with devastating force, completely annihilating one of the creatures in a brutal explosion of gore. Splattered with the creature's dark blood, he stands impassively as the survivors scatter in terror. He watches the retreat, a thought striking him as odd. He wonders why they are all running in the same direction, rather than separating to ensure their escape. He senses a presence amidst the chaos, a guiding hand behind the creature's movements. The coordinated assault is nothing more than an annoyance. With a roar of frustration, he unleashes a devastating strike, tearing through the horde. As he fights, he analyzes their behavior. He realizes they aren't attacking him head-on. Their movements are too uniform, as if guided by a single will. This leads him to a critical conclusion. They must be protecting something. His gaze follows the flow of the retreating creatures, all of them funneling towards a large, derelict school building at the end of the street. A nauseating stench grows stronger as he approaches, turning his stomach. Smashing his way through the building's facade, he finds himself looking into a vast gymnasium, large enough to serve as a makeshift settlement. The gymnasium is teeming with life. Hordes of the pale creatures and armed goblins bow before a makeshift throne, upon which sits a massive, horned leader, the clear commander of this grotesque army. Within the goblin nest, Unos observes the source of the horde, the goblin queen. He learns that while goblins sometimes use other races to breed, the vast majority of their population is birthed directly by this single, monstrous matriarch. He processes the grim reality of their reproductive cycle. As long as the queen exists, their numbers will grow ceaselessly. It is revealed that 34 goblins are born each day, reaching adulthood in a mere 20 days, a rate of growth so rapid it seems almost magical. His expression hardens with disgust and resolve at the thought of such a creature. Concluding there is no other choice, he bellows a single word, "Kill," and launches himself into the fray, crashing down upon the goblin guards. He questions their desperate attempt to protect their queen, dismissing their efforts as useless. With brutal efficiency, he tears through the swarm of smaller creatures, splattering their dark blood across the chamber. In moments, the floor is littered with the mangled corpses of the goblin horde. Standing amidst the carnage, he notes that he has defeated nearly everyone. All that remains is to bring down the queen herself, but he hesitates. His reluctance stems from a powerful aversion. He does not want to get any closer to them because of their terrible smell. His mind conjures an image of their foulness, picturing them swarming a captive who begs for the release of death. He steels himself, realizing he must kill them without approaching any further. From a distance, he begins to gather power for an attack. The remaining goblin guards turn, confused and sensing a new danger, but unable to pinpoint its source. Having resolved to attack from afar, Unos prepares a projectile. He considers that the only real problem is his aim, clutching a rough, heavy-looking rock in his hand. He reasons, however, that with a target as large as the goblin queen, there should be no problem. With a powerful spin, he hurls the rock, which strikes the massive creature with explosive force, splattering gore across the cavern. He launches another projectile, noting with some frustration that while he was aiming for the head, he struck the belly instead. Still, he deems it a perfect hit. A third projectile finds its mark, obliterating a smaller goblin's head. The devastating assault leaves the goblin queen's corpse torn apart upon her birthing mattress, surrounded by the remains of her slaughtered brood. With the cleaning completed, a captive blonde elf woman thanks Unos profusely for saving her. She expresses her relief at having survived the ordeal. Despite the victory, he is disgusted by the stench of goblin viscera clinging to his body and begins to wonder if there's a river nearby where he can wash. He soon finds a place to cleanse himself. Feeling refreshed in both mind and body, he resolves to continue his search. He walks through the ruins of a town, confident that in a settlement of this size, he is sure to find what he is looking for. His search is rewarded. An expression of pure delight crosses his face as he spots his objective in the distance, exclaiming that he's found it. Before him stands a large, multi-story structure, a relic of a past age, the shopping mall. He rummages through the abandoned store, his excitement growing. In the kitchenware section, he finds a sturdy iron grill and frying pan, perfect for a barbecue. Moving to the sports section, he discovers a large hiking backpack, realizing that with a few adjustments, he can carry it on his back. His successful haul sends a wave of triumph through him, and he strikes a victorious pose outside the dilapidated building. His search continues inside, where he inspects the grocery aisles. He wonders if the canned foods and cold drinks are still good, but notes that the salt has long since expired. In the home appliances section, he spots a cooler box, thinking it would be perfect for preserving any surplus he might find. With his new supplies gathered, he stands fully equipped. The modified backpack is on his back, carrying the iron grill. A cooler box is strapped to his side, and inside the pack are his magic sword, a potion, the frying pan, and canned food. But amidst his satisfaction, a sudden, dreadful thought strikes him. He breaks into a sweat, realizing with horror that he forgot to gather information regarding the Empire. The panic, however, was a feint. He sits calmly on a mattress amidst the rubble, surrounded by scavenged newspapers. He was only kidding. He had diligently collected what he could find. He muses that shopping malls are heaven, thrilled to be around human-made things after so long. He managed to find a few things from magazines and newspapers, but after 200 years, much of it has deteriorated beyond recognition. From the fragmented accounts, he pieces together the history of the war. As he expected, the situation in the Empire was dire. He recalls reading that the Western Front collapsed, an outcome he attributes to the overwhelming strength of someone or something named Einhell. This leads him to his primary question, the one he is most curious about. What happened after May 25th, 1667? He soon finds an article from that very day. It states that a decision was made to send the ultimate trump card. The words give him a bad feeling, and he wonders if this unease stems from his nature as a natural imperialist. The phrase hangs in the air, heavy with unspoken menace. He sat amidst the scattered newspapers, the words echoing in his mind. His homeland, was it truly gone? He remained silent, the weight of the possibility pressing down on him. The thought of returning had always been there, a distant notion he should pursue someday. But fear had held him back, a dread so potent he actively tried to avoid thinking about it. Now, however, a new resolve hardened within him. If he truly wanted to confirm the truth, there was only one place to go, the imperial capital. Lying down, he accepted the path ahead. All he needed to do was prepare his heart for whatever he might find and, someday, make the journey. As sleep began to take him, he formulated a more immediate plan. Tomorrow, he would head to Luke Dill, a town near the border, to check on the state of the kingdom of Canaan. Meanwhile, in another location, a man named Orlando was being shaken by the shoulders. An urgent voice questioned him, confirming that Luke Dill was the location of the Goblin's Den. The speaker, a man named Arngale, leaned in with intensity. He stated that the situation was a big deal, which was precisely why he was asking for the help of Orlando's team and their considerable strength. Orlando brushed him off, telling Arngale not to be so dramatic. Unfazed, Arngale simply asked if he could handle the job. A confident grin spread across Orlando's face. He declared that he couldn't possibly say no when asked so formally. Instead of a bow, however, he demanded a large reward. With his team assembled behind him, he announced that Takatsuki no Senjo had taken the mission, viewing it as a good warm-up for their new members. Within a dense forest, a group of pale, gaunt humanoids shuffles forward, their movements agitated and their mouths hanging open. Their unease is directed towards a massive, armored figure standing motionless against a tree. The being, Unos, remains silent, observing the creatures. He suddenly springs forward with a cheerful wave, startling the creatures as he introduces himself. "Hi everyone, it's me, Unos." He explains to the bewildered humanoids that they are witnessing his imitation ability. He had worried this body would stand out, but thanks to his camouflage, he was able to achieve something amazing. The armored being suddenly recoils, clutching his head as if in pain. He shouts that the experience is too much to handle. He apologizes, explaining that he completely forgot how high-spec his body is when he gets upset. He reflects that the scientific power of the Empire is so advanced it can only be defined as scary with his limited vocabulary. His thoughts drift back to the previous day, recalling how he went to sleep out of sheer exhaustion. He realizes his new body doesn't actually need sleep or even feel sleepy, which leads him to a conclusion. There's one thing he must be careful about. Continuing his internal monologue, he notes that he slept like a log, completely unaware, and that the same applies to eating. The danger becomes clear. If he runs out of energy while fighting, he will be vulnerable. He must be cautious. His eye narrows, the concentric rings within it focusing with mechanical precision. Through this enhanced vision, he spots a massive castle wall in the distance. He recognizes it as proof that he has reached the border town, concluding that it must be Luke Dill. He observes a group of pale humanoids fleeing from a gate, questioning if they are fighting the cannon people. Seeing them running away, he realizes something else is happening and is momentarily confused. Remembering his ability to imitate his surroundings, he decides to investigate the chaos more closely. He sees that the pale creatures are not fighting soldiers, but are being attacked by goblins. The sounds of battle fill the air inside the border town of Luke Dill. Having infiltrated the city, he successfully activates his camouflage, blending seamlessly into the surface of a building to watch unnoticed. His attention is drawn to the heart of the conflict, where he identifies Kanan's army by the red cloths on their right arms. A commander assesses the grim situation. His 50 soldiers are completely surrounded by 300 goblins. He rallies his troops, ordering everyone to watch each other's backs, and for the archers to get ready. From his concealed position, Unos analyzes the commander's tactics. Though he cannot understand the words, he recognizes the man is giving excellent instructions. He notes the commander's sword technique seems somewhat amateurish, but he uses it effectively and is not being overwhelmed by the goblin horde. As he anticipated, the 300 goblins are wiped out in the blink of an eye. He reflects on his hatred for goblins, whose terrible smell prevented him from getting any closer. The pale humanoids, whom he dismisses as mere scavengers, flee the scene. With the battle over, the captain laments that he can't leave without taking anything. He commands a mage named Casetta to use detection magic and find any survivors. As the spell is cast, Unos, still hidden, suddenly feels a painful, itching sensation all over his body. The magic instantly reveals his presence. The mage shouts to her captain that he's running away. The captain, astonished that such magic to fool detection could exist, orders his squad to pursue. Unos panics, wondering if he was found because of his imitation or through their magic. He leaps from the building, realizing he has been completely detected. He curses himself for getting so excited about his camouflage that he let his guard down. Deciding these humans are too much trouble, he focuses entirely on his escape. As he fled, one of his pursuers, a female mage, confidently declared that with her superior leg strength, she could easily outrun their target. Suddenly, a massive eruption of dark energy stopped Unos in his tracks. The mage, now at a distance, watched as a firewall materialized, blocking her path. From the flames, Unos turned and roared a challenge. The challenge was met by a man with dark, messy hair and a confident smirk. He stepped forward, brandishing a large, crystalline sword, seemingly unimpressed by the display of power. Unos glared at the soldier, his voice a low growl. He questioned if the man was intentionally provoking him, sensing the challenge in his posture. He felt his blood boiling. Though he had no desire to fight humans, he knew there was no guarantee of how they would handle him if he unleashed his true strength. His fist clenched in anticipation. He turned his full attention to the soldier, identifying him as the one who had issued the challenge. The man's confident expression wavered slightly as he took in the monster's imposing presence. The soldier, Orlando, voiced his surprise. He had thought he was pursuing a normal monster, but admitted he had never seen a creature like this before. Turning to his blonde companion, Orlando remarked that their target looked quite dangerous. The woman, Annie, acknowledged him by name, and he confessed with a wry smile that he was starting to feel scared. His demeanor shifted to that of commander. Orlando roared for the rookies to step back, warning them that this monster was on a completely different level than the goblins. He then muttered a complaint directed at Arngale, stating he wasn't being paid for this level of threat. Unos acknowledged that ordering the amateurs back was a good decision. Seeing the soldiers prepare for battle, he declared that he too would fight at his best and lunge forward, roaring, "Here I come." As he charged forward, Orlando's squad prepared to meet him. The mages and archers took aim, their expressions a mixture of focus and alarm. Orlando roared the command to fire. A volley of arrows and magical energy erupted from the line, converging on the monstrous figure. The projectiles struck Unos's armored hide, but instead of piercing it, they shattered or bounced harmlessly away. Orlando watched in disbelief, realizing his opponent had suffered no injuries. His momentum unbroken, Unos crashed into the vanguard, swatting soldiers aside. Orlando grimaced, recognizing that the creature was single-handedly destroying their formation. He plowed through the soldiers with unstoppable force. One of the men, reeling back in shock, could scarcely believe that the initial coordinated assault had failed to even kill the monster. Watching his troops get thrown into disarray, Orlando understood they were outmatched and that he would have to handle this himself. A grim smile touched his lips. The creature's unscrupulous power was making his own blood boil with excitement as he prepared to enter the fray. Unos roars, demanding to know who started the conflict. From above, Orlando descends with his sword raised, declaring that Unos is the one responsible. His blade clashes against Unos's armored skin with a loud clang. Unos observes that despite the heavy weapon, the man's movements are quite fast, but confidently concludes that he is still too slow for him. The force of the block sends Orlando skidding backward. His comrades, including Arngale, watch in stunned silence, shocked that Unos deflected their captain's sword with his bare hands. Orlando's expression hardens with grim realization. He understands this is bad. At this rate, his troops will lose their morale. His gaze falls upon Unos, whose form has shifted to a darker, more menacing silhouette with a reptilian tail. Orlando acknowledges that the creature is a truly fearsome monster. As he processes the grave situation, the blonde warrior, Annie, suddenly sprints past him, her face a mask of fierce determination. He shouts her name in alarm, watching her charge recklessly toward the monster. Her sudden appearance catches Unos's attention. He seems momentarily distracted, his head tilting as he remarks on the arrival of a blonde beauty. He moves to strike her down, but she stands her ground, declaring that she won't let him pass. With incredible agility, she ducks under his sweeping attack. Unos is taken aback, surprised that she dodged it. Before he can recover, she raises a crossbow, aiming it directly at his face. The reflection of her determined form appears in his wide, shocked eye. A crossbow bolt sinks into Unos's head. Orlando and his men stare in disbelief at the scene. Annie stands firm before the towering creature, her weapon still raised. As Orlando breathes the word, "Monster," her shot found its mark, but the crossbow bolt lodged in Unos's head did little to slow him. The monster turned its attention to her, reaching out as Orlando cried her name in alarm, realizing the danger of her close range. He effortlessly seized Annie, his massive hand closing around her torso and lifting her into the air. She let out a choked gasp, caught in his powerful grip. Holding her aloft, Unos seemed to analyze his captive. He mused internally that she had a nice, well-trained body and found the sensation of holding her to be quite pleasant, even wondering about her measurements. His thoughts turned to what he would do next, briefly considering throwing her a little further away. However, his attention was immediately drawn back to her physique, a flicker of confusion crossing his mind. Suddenly, the reason for his confusion struck him with the force of a physical blow. He had made a startling realization about her size. Below, Orlando could only watch, frozen in place. He saw the monster's momentary distraction as an opportunity. Now, Orlando roared to his men. He declared that Annie had risked her life to give them this chance, and they could not let it go to waste. Together, they charged forward. Their charge was met with casual disdain. Muttering that he would forgive them for the sake of boobs, Unos effortlessly swatted the soldiers aside, his powerful limbs scattering them like dolls. As his men were scattered, Orlando pressed his own attack, only for his sword to be blocked by Unos's arm with a deafening clang. The warriors stared in disbelief, shouting, "But how again?" With the immediate threats neutralized, Unos returned his focus to his captive, raising a massive fist to crush her. "No, Annie!" Orlando screamed. But in that instant, Annie's expression hardened as she drew a blade that began to glow, prompting a shocked realization from Unos. A magic sword. Before his fist could connect, she drove the glowing weapon deep into his arm. A fierce smile crossed her face as the blade bit into flesh. Watching the direct hit from the magic sword, Orlando's face filled with horror. "We're doomed," he uttered in despair. He surveyed the grim scene before him, his soldiers surrounding the monstrous Unos. A stark realization settled in his mind. They could not defeat this creature. He saw only one path forward, to act as a distraction, buying time for as many of his people as possible to escape. As he steeled himself for this sacrifice, his gaze remained fixed on the creature. He questioned how long he could possibly last as a distraction against such a powerful opponent. In response, the monster raised its hand, pointing a single, armored finger directly at him. The gesture caught Orlando completely off guard, his eyes widening in disbelief as his companions watched with growing alarm. He was stunned. The idea of saving everyone by sacrificing himself was his own desperate plan, yet the monster was now presenting him with that very chance. Seeing his hesitation, his soldiers called out to him in concern, but he silenced them with a sharp command, ordering them all to stay back. As he faced the creature alone, the meaning of its gesture became clear. Unos wanted a duel, a one-on-one fight with him. Facing the monstrous Unos, The blonde warrior declares that any further fighting would be nothing more than a one-sided hunt. From his perspective, Unos recognizes his miscalculation. He has made a mistake. He steels himself, understanding that he must settle this conflict here and now. With no other choice, he lunges forward, closing the distance to the warriors in a blur of motion. In response to the charge, Orlando shouts at his comrades, questioning if they truly believe they can win alone and urging them not to be foolish. He tries to bolster their morale, promising to buy them the best drinks when they all make it home. He then abruptly grabs the blonde warrior's head, startling her as he tells her to hide her chest, otherwise he'll attack her himself. He offers a quick apology, but she, with tears welling in her eyes, can only call him an idiot. Orlando's focus shifts back to the imposing figure of Unos. He admits to himself a stark reality. He knows better than anyone that he cannot beat him. He contemplates the situation further. While Unos' purpose is unknown, it's clear the creature has chosen him specifically. The difference in their power is vast, but Orlando decides it doesn't matter as long as no one dies. He muses that while intelligent creatures are often a nuisance, that very trait is now useful, as Unos is waiting for him to make a move. He remembers his duty as a captain, to ensure as many of his subordinates as possible return alive. With this resolve solidifying his actions, he charges toward Unos, shouting that he's kept him waiting and that he will offer his life. As he raises his sword for the strike, his expression hardens. He declares that he has no intention of doing it for free. He faced his opponent, the monstrous Unos, who tensed its massive, armored frame in anticipation of the attack. He raised his sword high, preparing to bring it down in a powerful overhead strike against the crouched creature. Watching from a distance, his comrades, Arngale, Annie, Cassetta, and the blonde elf, could only look on with grave concern, the elf trembling as she clutched her chest. With a determined cry, Orlando lunged forward, swinging his blade down just as Unos exploded into motion, shattering the ground beneath it. But the creature's speed was far greater than he anticipated. Unos dodged the attack with ease and countered, striking Orlando's side. The captain realized with shock that the monster was much faster than before. The blow sent him reeling, his face contorting in pain. From the sidelines, Annie and the elf cried out his title in horror. Despite the agony, he tightened his grip on his sword, convinced that just one more slash was all he needed. He pushed through the pain, telling himself it wasn't over yet. His wide, sweat-drenched eyes betrayed the immense strain he was under as he fought to stay conscious and continue the fight. The pressure was too great. With a sickening crunch, the bones in his hand shattered, blood erupting from the ruined flesh as he let out a gasp of pain. His sword fell from his broken grasp. Unos seized him by the head, lifting him from the ground as his comrades screamed his name. Defeated, Orlando accepted his fate, thinking to himself that this was as far as he could go. With his foe seemingly defeated, Unos violently spits a small object onto the ground, where it lands with a wet smack. The object lies still as Orlando's comrades stare in stunned silence. Orlando himself, however, stands among them, completely unharmed but looking utterly bewildered by the entire situation. His confusion mounts as he wonders aloud if he did something wrong, or perhaps if Unos had somehow poisoned his head. Behind him, the monstrous creature begins to stir and stagger to its feet. As he puzzles over the strange event, the blonde elf woman approaches with a look of deep unease, hesitantly calling out his name while the other soldiers awkwardly look away. He turns to face her, his expression still one of pure confusion. She gets straight to the point, asking him a very direct question. When was the last time he washed his hair? Before Orlando can answer, another soldier sitting on the ground replies for him, stating that from what he remembers, it was about 3 years ago. The revelation sends a wave of horrified shock through the entire group. The air is suddenly filled with the sound of collective, visceral disgust. The truth finally dawns on him, and he flees at top speed, screaming about how disgusting it is. In the background, Unos, who had only meant to feign injury, reveals he was genuinely tormented by the filth and vows to beat Orlando up the next time they meet. As the chaos subsides, the blonde elf woman reflects that at least she didn't die in vain. Elsewhere, deep within a forest, Unos pauses, his attention caught by a new scent on the wind, the smell of human blood. He grins, remarking on the convenience of his new body. Though the source of the smell is distant, he feels confident that by sharpening his senses, he can find his way. He decides to investigate. On a desolate path, the armored being Unos stands over the fresh, bloody corpses of 3 travelers. Their bodies are mangled, lying in pools of their own blood next to a discarded bag. He offers a quiet, almost cheerful condolence. He examines the scene, concluding that the wounds were not inflicted by a monster. Their equipment has been plundered, and the tracks of a carriage lead away from the slaughter and into the forest. It was an attack by bandits, who stole the victim's cargo. A grim logic forms in his mind. If he is dealing with people who kill and steal, then it should be perfectly acceptable for him to take their things in turn. With this justification settled, he turns to follow the trail. Following the tracks, he quickly overtakes the bandits. He lands with a ground-shaking thud before them, his monstrous form startling the men, who cry out in alarm at the sudden appearance of a monster. His sudden arrival sends a wave of panic through their ranks. As Unos lets out a guttural roar, one of the bandits near a covered wagon shouts in confusion, demanding to know what has happened. The bandits break and flee in terror. One man, his face contorted in fear, begs his comrades not to leave him alone. Unos calmly instructs them not to run away. Moments later, he walks away from the now silent scene, expressing disappointment that no one even put up a fight. He approaches the abandoned carriage, wondering if the lack of resistance means its contents are not very valuable. He pulls back the curtain of the wagon, revealing its cargo. Huddled inside are 5 women and a young girl, all staring up at him with wide, fearful eyes. From within the group of captives, one individual with slender, crossed legs reaches up and removes a smooth, featureless white mask. The sight seems to delight him. A sparkle appears in his eyes as he looks upon the wagon's contents, revising his earlier assessment. He guesses the cargo is valuable after all. He peers into the wagon, realizing the captive women were intended to be sold. This is an unexpected turn, but he notes that the cargo is fully loaded. He considers his options. While the sight is appealing, his true desire is for daily necessities. A better plan forms in his mind. Chase the bandits who just escaped and follow them to their hideout. His thoughts are overheard, and one of the women immediately agrees, urging him to proceed with that plan. The creature pulls back the curtain slightly. The reddish-haired woman, holding the young girl protectively, looks up at him and hesitantly asks if he saved them. His response is not words, but action. With a sudden, violent motion, he smashes the bars of their cage, causing the women to cry out in shock. The metal bars of the cage doors shatter and fly apart under the immense force of the blow. This leaves the women utterly confused. Unos takes one last look, committing the view to his memory before turning to leave. He then turns away from the wagon, tapping his head thoughtfully as he prepares to depart. Now, deep within the forest, he pauses. A long, ribbon-like sensor extends from his head as he sniffs the air, detecting the distinct smell of the fleeing bandits. He sets off on their trail, reflecting on the amazing technology of the Empire. All his physical abilities and his 5 senses have been greatly improved. He trudges forward, lamenting the sacrifices made for his current form. While he doesn't need weapons, he internally fumes that he would have much preferred to keep his communication skills and his manhood. His internal monologue is cut short as he hones in on the source of the scent he's been tracking. Hiding his backpack in a nearby bush, he activates an imitation function and approaches a dark cave entrance, certain the smell is coming from within. He cautiously enters the cavern, noting its surprisingly neat construction. He wonders if this is the bandits' hideout, questioning the lack of a lookout. He speculates they must be supremely confident in their ability to handle any intruders. Moving deeper into the darkness, he comes to a halt before a set of iron bars. He has found a prison. Within the cell lies a grim scene. The lifeless body of a young woman, her clothes in tatters, lies next to the picked-clean skeleton of another victim. The sight fills him with revulsion. He notes with horror that there's even a small child among the victims. This is sickening, he thinks, concluding that these men deserve no mercy. His grim resolve is interrupted by the sound of loud, angry shouting echoing from further down the passage. A moment later, a man comes running into view, frantically apologizing to someone he calls boss. The large, imposing boss follows, berating his subordinate. He questions if the man is being scolded for abandoning the cargo and running away, noting that the other subordinates are dead. The boss roars, demanding to know how his underling could leave it behind. Unos, observing from the shadows, feels no sympathy for the man. The boss's tirade continues as he screams at the man not to get scared by monsters and run away. As he listens, Unos easily understands their conversation. He notes their lack of fluency in the Canaan native tongue, leading him to wonder if the boss is a foreigner. He considered the scale of the operation. A nationwide criminal organization surely meant a great haul of loot. His mind filled with visions of magical swords, rare spices, and powerful potions. His thoughts of treasure were interrupted by a change in the cave's activity. He noted that the number of bandits seemed to have decreased, concluding that the time was right to make his move and confront them. He approached the door to the main chamber, only to pause. The entryway was small, and a brief moment of concern flashed through his mind. What if he got stuck? The thought was quickly dismissed. There was only one option: break through. With a tremendous crash, he burst through the wall itself, shattering stone and wood as he announced his intrusion. The bandit boss, caught completely by surprise, could only stare in disbelief. But Unos was not the only intruder. A monstrous figure stood amidst the carnage, the bodies of the bandit leader and his subordinate already dispatched. It turned its featureless face towards the new arrival and demanded to know who he was. The sight of the creature left him momentarily speechless, his eyes wide with shock. His gaze took in the impossible form before him. The upper torso of a humanoid fused seamlessly to the massive, multi-legged body of a spider. The spider hybrid seemed to recognize him, accusingly asking if he was the monster responsible for kidnapping its women. This unexpected question only deepened Unos' surprise. The creature's patience wore thin, and it angrily demanded he stop messing around, its words spoken in the Ferlito's language. The language, the form, it all clicked into place. A stunning realization struck Unos. This being was just like him, an experimental soldier of the Empire. Orlando, looking uncharacteristically clean and well-dressed, stands before a desk. The man seated there, Arngale, looks up with a start as Orlando demands to know what has happened. Arngale leans forward, asking Orlando how many years it has been since he last saw him, so cleaned up. Orlando seems momentarily lost for words. He explains that a lot has happened, recalling the harsh critiques of his comrades. One had always wanted to tell him he smelled bad, Another complained that looking at him hurt their eyes, and a third declared he was on the same level as a goblin. Arngale's expression becomes serious. He confirms that the goblins were wiped out without any trouble, but he has some bad news to report. Orlando begins his report, stating that they discovered a new type of monster. He holds up his bandaged hands, revealing that even with a full-scale attack, they couldn't lay a single finger on the creature. Worse, it took the lives of 7 of their men. He continues, describing the creature as a gray-colored humanoid, roughly the size of an ogre, with a tail. As he speaks, Arngale listens with growing concern, a bead of sweat forming on his temple. Orlando concludes grimly that they were completely defeated. He elaborates on the monster's abilities, recalling the feudal battle. It was strong, sturdy, agile, and seemed quite intelligent. Most alarmingly, neither conventional weapons nor magic were effective against it. His face contorts into a dark, almost manic grin. "Isn't that funny?" he asks, his tone laced with a bitter irony. Arngale, processing the dire information, questions why Orlando's Titan Slayer was of no use. Orlando admits that it's a pitiful story, but he couldn't even manage to land a single hit on the creature. He then turns the problem back to his superior, asking how they are supposed to deal with such a foe. Arngale leans on his desk, stating that this is precisely what he wants to figure out. He concludes that, at a minimum, they will need a high-quality magic sword and a high-ranking wizard. Orlando sighs, looking away from Arngale. He speculates on what would happen if the Night Order were to encounter this new species, concluding that even they would probably be overwhelmed and defeated in the end. Arngale, looking exhausted, pinches the bridge of his nose and asks if Orlando wants him to report this. Orlando confirms without hesitation, stating that it's his job. He adds that from now on, he is counting on Arngale to be involved in dealing with this new species, at least within the scope of his capabilities. Still weary, Arngale admits he doesn't know if the creature was a mutation or a previously undiscovered species, but acknowledges the grim possibility that similar beings could appear again. Orlando reacts with alarm, shouting at him not to say anything that could jinx them. Elsewhere, the spider hybrid stands over the splattered remains of its victim. It muses that if several monsters like itself were to appear, humanity would be wiped out in no time. The creature turns its attention to Unos, mocking him as a big dumb oaf. Unos recognizes the language as Ferlitos and deduces that the spider hybrid must be an experimental soldier from the Empire, just like him. He attempts to reply in a guttural tongue, identifying himself as a citizen of the Empire, but the spider hybrid tells him to stop growling, forcing Unos to conclude that text-based communication is their only option. As he places his fingers on the ground, Unos feels something entangle them, a transparent thread. From behind, the spider hybrid warns him not to dare move without permission. The spider hybrid reveals its full form, its massive arachnid body towering over the ensnared Unos. Unos is stunned by the suddenness of the trap, wondering if it was planned all along and lamenting that amateurs are truly useless. It berates Unos for failing to abduct even one person and getting caught, ruining its plans for the next girl. Suddenly, the creature's lower torso explodes in a shower of black fluid. It lets out a piercing scream, clutching its groin and crying out in agony over its lost magnificent thing. Unos observes this, realizing the creature hadn't even reacted when the bandits were assaulting their captive, and finds he understands its pain. He recalls the spider hybrid's cruel games, grabbing a woman and child, forcing them to dance naked. Despite its agony, the creature reflects on the memory, admitting to itself that it was pretty fun and that perhaps it should try again. The creature's handiwork was evident nearby, where the blonde warrior, Annie, and her companion lay motionless and bloodied on the ground. He turned his attention back to Unos, who was still struggling against his bonds. With a maniacal laugh, he wondered aloud where he should try putting his threads next. Crushing a bandit's remains underfoot, he expressed a twisted understanding of the anger that comes with a modified body, imagining the pain of being unrecognized by loved ones. Despite this, he judged Unos to be worthless and resolved to eliminate him then and there. Unos realized that a thread made for humans was insufficient to stop a monster. He understood the danger of his careless approach and the nature of the threat itself. It dawned on him that his opponent, who seemed to have let his guard down, was not a mere beast, but another experimental soldier. His first priority became creating distance. He then moved swiftly, attempting to sever the binding threads. The threads, however, were everywhere, completely ensnaring the blonde warrior in a thick cocoon. He spun rapidly, but the massive amount of thread, prepared in advance, held fast. The creature mocked his efforts, telling him not to waste his intelligence, and calling him a damned monster for daring to resist. With a final declaration that this was the end, the creature lunged, intent on grabbing Unos and crushing him completely. In a shocking move, the creature shed its humanoid skin, revealing its true, arachnid form beneath. The sudden transformation startled Unos, creating an opening for the spider hybrid to strike, tearing viciously into his side. As Unos cried out in agony, the spider hybrid laughed, revealing that the mucus on its skin was acidic. "Die, monster!" it commanded, as the corrosive slime ate away at Unos' arm, dissolving flesh and armor alike. He collapsed to the ground, a groan escaping him as he realized the true nature of the attack: poison. As the spider hybrid laughed and retreated into the distance, Unos felt a dangerous numbness spreading through his body. The creature's departure without confirming the kill was a grim sign of the poison's potency. With his life on the line, he knew he had to do something, and a single thought pierced through the haze. The potion given to him by the kind, well-endowed woman. Dragging his failing body across the ground, he fumbled for the small bottle. He had no idea what effect it would have, but at this point, it was his only hope. His fingers closed around the vial. He managed to pull himself into a kneeling position amidst the foliage, his entire being focused on a single, desperate plea for the concoction to work. To his astonishment, the effects were instantaneous. The pain and numbness vanished. He stared at his right hand, which had been corroded down to the bone just moments before, now completely restored to normal. A powerful roar of relief and disbelief erupted from him. He was healed. The potion was incredible. Overwhelmed with gratitude, he thanked the woman who had given it to him, his lifesaver, even if he couldn't quite remember her face. On the forest floor, Unos reflects on his recent battle, admitting to himself that he panicked. It was the greatest crisis of his life, the first time in 200 years he had felt true pain. He considers the terrifying possibility of his foe using that same ability against humans. He realizes that if he fails to act, there will inevitably be more victims like the ones he has already witnessed. Despite this, he clarifies his motives to himself. He has no intention of playing the hero, but he cannot stand by while innocent women become victims. His true, selfish desire is to pursue erotic pleasures, and he refuses to let that possibility be taken from him. He rises to his feet, feeling the pain and numbness from his injuries completely vanish. This personal justification, he decides, is more than enough reason to kill the creature. Standing resolute amidst the trees, he focuses, recalling his target's scent. Knowing he must hurry, he prepares to give chase. His target is already on the move. The spider hybrid drags a wagon through the woods, inside which the blonde elf woman trembles in fear. The spider hybrid leers at his captive, noting her beauty and remarking that she would be perfect with a child. As he contemplates how to torment her, a dark, robed figure with a skeletal mask watches silently from a high branch. His vile thoughts are interrupted by a sudden, deafening explosion. The tree directly behind him erupts into splinters, and he turns, startled. From the dust and debris, Unos emerges, his fist still clenched from the powerful blow. The spider hybrid stares in utter disbelief, shouting in his mind, wondering how his foe could possibly still be alive. He seethes with annoyance. As Unos stands before him, he sees the wagon carrying the blonde elf woman beginning to roll away, his prize escaping due to this infuriating interruption. He found it intensely annoying. The armored creature was wary of his threat and refused to draw near. He watched as his opponent picked up stones, a flicker of disbelief crossing his mind. Could this monster actually be getting smart? His strategy was simple. Having witnessed Unos' precision with thrown projectiles, the spider creature would be forced to keep its distance, unable to chase the carriage. This would buy the women the time they needed to escape. Now, all that remained was a test of endurance between the two of them. But the stalemate was not to last. The skeletal mage, observing from the shadows, grew impatient. "I'm so annoyed," he seethed, deciding to intervene himself. Unos, however, was prepared for this. If they closed the distance, he would simply retreat. As if to prove the point, he hurled a stone, forcing the spider hybrid back, prompting an enraged shout from the mage not to run away. He unleashed a volley of dark projectiles, which whistled through the air. Unos twisted his body, narrowly avoiding the attack as the mage's fury intensified. The armored warrior immediately pressed his advantage. His tactic was relentless. If the opponent retreated, he would close the distance even more. The spider hybrid cried out in frustration as it was forced back once again. He surged forward, his powerful legs churning up the earth, goading his foe to hurry up. In response, the skeletal mage spat a torrent of black poison, roaring for Unos to drop dead. The armored warrior stood firm, bracing against the corrosive spray. The poison had no effect. He calmly assessed the situation, noting the spider hybrid's attempt to flee while he was supposedly distracted by the venom. "Is that all?" he thought. "That's within my expectations." His entire strategy was a simple, effective loop. Close the distance when they retreat and retreat when they advance. He used the trees to clear away any entangling threads and threw stones at every opening. The skeletal mage, incensed by these tactics, demanded he fight fair and square. He stared down his opponent, his mind clear and focused. In the first place, this was not some grand battle to be fought with honor. It was, and always had been, simply a hunt. He continues his relentless assault, striking the spider hybrid again and again. The creature is thrown back, its body splattering against the trees as Unos gives it no quarter, pressing his attack from every angle. The hunt continues under the pale light of the full moon. Days blur into an unending battle. The spider hybrid, sweating and weary, questions how many days have passed since the fight began. It feels as though it has been fighting for over a month, its stamina pushed to the absolute limit. It finds the situation utterly strange. It is being cornered, but what's truly baffling is why a monster is being dealt with in this manner by a mere human. A wave of dizziness washes over the creature. It realizes this is bad. Its head is spinning, a sign of extreme exhaustion. The reason for its fatigue becomes clear. It's running out of energy. Unos' constant harassment prevents it from eating or sleeping, and as a result, it can no longer produce its threads or poison. Seizing the moment of weakness, Uno's delivers a crushing blow directly to the hybrid's jaw, sending a spray of black fluid from its mouth. The creature stumbles back, overwhelmed by the searing pain. It can't comprehend what is happening or why it hurts so much. The agony triggers a memory of a past life, of being experimented on by men in suits, questioning why it had to be the one to endure such suffering. The memory fuels its present despair, and it lets out a furious, desperate roar, cursing its fate. In a final, desperate gambit, the spider hybrid unleashes a barrage of projectiles in all directions. But Uno's is too quick, weaving through the attack and closing the distance to deliver another brutal strike. He stands over the fallen spider hybrid, which writhes on the ground, blood pooling beneath it. The creature whimpers, its voice filled with agony, repeating that it hurts. In a brutal, decisive motion, he brings his fist down, shattering the hybrid's head in a spray of black fluid. With the deed done, he turns and walks away, leaving the twitching, headless corpse behind him. Guttural, dying groans echo from the remains. His walk is cut short as he slams his fist into a nearby tree with a resounding crack. Leaning against the rough bark, he begins to scratch frantically at his own armored face, his body trembling. A sudden thought stops him cold. He recognizes the words the creature spoke. It was the Ferlito's language. He turns back toward the corpse, a sense of disbelief washing over him as the hybrid's final, broken words come back to him. No way, he thinks. The full weight of the creature's statement hits him under the moonlight. You're just like me. He recalls his own command to the creature, a single, brutal word. Die. The memory continues, the hybrid's desperate, tearful questions echoing in his mind. Pleas for recognition, asking if they weren't the same, if they weren't comrades. As the memory fades, he continues his slow walk away from the forest. He relived the moment in his mind. The sickening crunch as he obliterated the creature's head, silencing its plea of comradeship. The memory brought a surge of revulsion. Under the cold light of the full moon, he rejected the very idea, growling to the memory of the fallen creature, "Don't lump me together with you." Atop a rocky cliff, the monstrous form of Uno's surveys the rugged landscape, his large frame a stark silhouette against the sky. He takes a moment to reintroduce himself as Uno's, recalling the strange circumstances of his return, waking after 2 centuries to find himself transformed into a monster. His current location, he explains, is the Elven country, the Republic of Einhell. From his vantage point, he observes the peaceful lives of its inhabitants, like an elven woman and child walking through their village. His thoughts then drift to another matter, a loose end from his past mission. He suddenly remembers the Canaan reconnaissance he was supposed to conduct. He recounts his journey after defeating the spider-like creature, explaining that he traveled to the frontline city situated on the border between the Kingdom of Canaan and the Republic of Einhell. Upon arriving, he gazes at the city's fortifications and comes to a grim realization. The presence of simple ballistae on the walls tells him that they have abandoned science. Meanwhile, within an elven settlement, a blonde elf woman explains the local philosophy. In Einhell, nature worship is prevalent, leading to minimal development. As a result, she notes, monsters tend to increase more easily, a manageable issue for the strong elves, but a huge problem for humans. Back on the cliff, Uno's considers this very problem. The frontline city is supposed to be equipped with the highest grade weapons from Canaan specifically to deal with these monsters. But as he looks closer at the weapons, a jolt of shock runs through him. They are ballistae, the exact same model as those used 200 years ago. The shock gives way to profound disappointment. He concludes that the town is shabby and run down, and with that realization, he loses all remaining expectations for the Kingdom of Canaan. He stood overlooking a vast, sun-drenched valley, his mind made up. The next place he was curious about was Einhell. With a grunt of determination, he decided it was about time. With that thought, he leaped from the cliffside, descending rapidly. 16 days had passed since his arrival in the country, time he had spent learning about the elves. Now, he resolved to head toward the reconnaissance spot. From his hidden vantage point, he recalled what he'd learned. He had heard that elves were experts in magic, unlike humans who required incantations. The elves, however, used powerful magic endlessly and without any chance, a fact he considered to be total cheating. Beyond their magical prowess, he observed that the women there were incredibly attractive and noted that the men were as well. This mastery was possible because magic was an integral part of their daily lives. He watched them use it for the most mundane of tasks, lighting a fire, picking up an item, even drying clothes. It was this constant, casual use that allowed them to master it to such an extent. But as he watched from the bushes near a tranquil pond, he knew their magic wasn't the true terror of the elves. He felt a surge of anticipation, declaring internally that the greatest threat was here. It was about time. He mused on their reputation. It was well known that elves were renowned for their appearance, but seeing them firsthand revealed, it was on another level entirely. He considered this an undeniable truth, having personally observed over 100 elven women at this very reconnaissance spot. His patrol of the river area was complete. He felt he now fully understood the biology of this dangerous species. It was time he decided to move to the next spot. He arrived at reconnaissance spot number 02. From the cover of the foliage, his eye narrowed, its iris constricting as he focused intently on his target. His gaze locked onto a serene elf woman surrounded by 2 small children. He had found them. This was the one he called Miss number 06. He continued his assessment. Among all the elves he had seen, number 6 was particularly to his taste, and one of the two who posed a real threat. He noted her routine. Whether she was a teacher or something similar, she always brought children with her at this time. The name, he confirmed to himself, was of course a nickname he had given her. He continued his observation from a distance, his thoughts drifting to the aesthetics of the scene. He mused that while being completely unclothed was one thing, there was a particular appeal when wet undergarments clung to the body, becoming translucent. This sight filled him with a sense of awe, making him marvel at the sheer power of such eroticism. He also discovered a new faculty. By concentrating, he could now magnify his vision, allowing for an even more detailed inspection. He settled into a concealed position within the foliage, wondering if the same scene would play out again today. From his hiding spot, he watched the elf teacher and the children by the water's edge. His question was soon answered. The children began to play a prank on the teacher, with one of the boys tugging at her clothing. She cried out for them to stop, but Unos noted her gentle nature, realizing she was an easy target for their mischief. He concluded that this kind of interaction was precisely why the young boys behaved as they did. The teacher was left flustered by the prank. However, the young elf boy, far from being repentant, declared the situation outrageous and vehemently encouraged the others to continue. Crouched within the dense foliage, Unos lets out a weary sigh. He reflects on the day's events, thinking that number 6 had been amazing, as expected, and that even the little brat had performed well. In the distance, the elf teacher and her young charges laugh together by the water's edge. Suddenly, a rustling sound from the water snaps him to attention. He peers out from his hiding spot, startled and sweating. From the river emerges a tall, imposing elf woman with long, light hair and a dark blindfold covering her eyes. She leans directly over his hiding spot, her presence overwhelming him. She asks if he intends to give her no chance to rest. Flustered, Unos stammers her designation, number 08, noting that she has arrived earlier than usual. Internally, he can only think of her as a terrifying elf. His gaze remains fixed on her. He admits to himself that number 08 is an elf he is particularly interested in, for the simple reason that her breasts are so large. He continues his silent observation, recalling that she is always accompanied by 2 attendants. This leads him to believe she holds a significant status in her country. He also finds himself pondering the reason she never opens her eyes. Furthermore, he finds it intriguing that her bathing seems more ritualistic compared to the other elves. All these details combine to form a single conclusion in his mind. She is not an ordinary person. Number 08 possesses a mystique that makes her stand out. The weight of this realization strikes him with full force, his eyes wide with a mix of awe and terror. He feels utterly overwhelmed. He cannot afford to overlook a single one of her actions. The thought echoes in his mind. She is a terrifying elf, with an impact twice as powerful as he could have imagined. After the encounter, he remains seated in the forest, dazed and wiping sweat from his armored brow, trying to process what just happened. He watched the distant elves, a feeling of powerlessness settling over him. It was futile. Even after being shown such a feast, he was incapable of acting on it. He had to accept that fact. His thoughts drifted to a memory of a different being, a tall, skeletal figure who had once raged in frustration. It had screamed about its magnificent thing being gone, lamenting that no matter how it tormented its victims, it could not get the desired reaction. He recalled that the creature had also been adept at using its unique abilities. It felt as though it had awakened to its true nature far earlier than he had. The memory prompted a dark question. Had all the accumulated emptiness finally driven it to madness? Returning his focus to the present, he couldn't help but feel a strange sympathy for that brute. The thought that he might end up the same way was a persistent fear. As the elves began to depart, he silently wished for number 8 to be careful on her way home. He turned away from the river, engaging a built-in function for emotional suppression. It was a useful tool in times like these, preventing him from dwelling on matters that could not be changed. Standing alone amidst the trees, he surveyed the darkening landscape and noted that it was already quite late. The fading light signaled an opportunity. He knew the elves did not come to the river after sunset, making it the perfect time to gather supplies and wash his things. He set about his evening tasks, sharpening a magic sword that cut exceptionally well. Nearby, the carcass of his latest hunt was draining. As he prepared the meat, he noted that the taste was lacking and that he needed to find some salt. As he worked, night fell completely, the crescent moon rising high above the clouds as bats began their nightly flight. In the quiet of the forest, Unos rises from the leaf-strewn ground, unable to find rest. He lies back down, shifts, and sits up again, his mind clearly in turmoil. His agitation is fueled by the memory of another's words, a skeletal figure insisting there were many reasons to go back. It had argued that if he returned to the Empire, he might find more of them, other test subjects. He questions himself, wondering if his hesitation was simply because he couldn't make up his mind. In truth, he admits to himself, he has known for a long time that he should return to the imperial capital. The path there is perilous, leading through a vast forest and ruins teeming with monsters. He recalls a moment from the past, sitting in a derelict room surrounded by old newspapers. The date on them was stopped on May 2nd. This memory reinforces his deepest fear. He suspects the Empire is probably already gone, a truth he has known but refused to admit. If he goes back, he might lose even a tiny bit of hope that the Empire might still be continuing somewhere. Sitting alone in the darkness, he poses a chilling question to himself. If he confirms the worst, would he also end up broken, just like that skeletal figure? His gaze drifts to the river, where the elves are bathing. He acknowledges that watching them every day is enjoyable, a pleasant distraction, but it is not a solution. He finally understands. Deceiving himself and living with this peaceful lie might actually be more difficult than facing the truth he has been avoiding. He stood, his broad, armored back turned to the forest he had called home. The time for deliberation was over. With his mind made up, he began his journey across the desolate landscape. He knew what he had to do. He would go to the imperial capital. He paused on a rocky outcrop, calling out to those he was leaving behind. He announced his departure to number 06 and number 08, then turned and strode away without waiting for reply. His farewell, however, was directed towards a lively scene by the river. The elf teacher, number 06, was bathing with the children, playfully chiding them to stop as they tugged at her towel. Crouched behind the foliage, he watched them, his resolve crumbling. He admitted to himself that it was incredibly difficult to lie to himself and just leave. His gaze remained fixed on the peaceful scene, his departure stall. In a starkly lit room, a man with a chilling smile beckons a small, hesitant girl. He calls her Daira, telling her to come closer and remove her clothes, framing the order as a step toward becoming a great wizard. The memory shifts to the girl's profound distress. She feels disgusted and frightened, wishing only to go home to her parents. As a man in a doctor's coat examines her, he mutters for her to grow up quickly so he can return to his hometown. The girl is left trembling in a bed, the trauma overwhelming her. The vision fades, replaced by the sight of an adult woman with magenta hair and a witch's hat. Gister, standing before the charred ruins of a town. The desolate landscape stretches before her, a silent testament to some past catastrophe. She jolts awake with a cry, the horror of a nightmare clinging to her. Sitting up in bed, her eyes are wide with terror, the disturbing memories still vivid and painful. Later, having composed herself, she walks through the bustling streets of Recall, a town in the kingdom of Canaan. Her attention is caught by chatter from a nearby crowd, and she turns, inquiring about a monster they mention. She finds a potential informant, a woman with long, reddish hair. The woman claims she's already told the guards, but Gister offers a silver coin for any information, no matter how trivial. Intrigued by the offer, the woman agrees to tell Gister everything she witnessed. The informant begins her tale, describing a scene of utter chaos. She explains that she and others were being taken to a kidnapper's hideout when a monster suddenly appeared, turning their grim situation into a bloodbath. She continues, stating that the kidnappers fled almost immediately. Given the terrifying creature that stood before them, their flight was entirely understandable. The woman explains that the monster's actions were puzzling. It didn't take anything and eventually ran off. However, she notes that it stared at them intently, as if searching for something. Gister asks why it attacked the carriage in the first place, but the informant admits she doesn't know. Her voice rises with remembered fear as she concludes her story. Just as she thought the creature was gone for good, it came right back, its massive head appearing suddenly at the carriage window. She finished her account, explaining that the creature simply stared at them for a while before turning and leaving without doing anything. She added, however, that it was just a woman's intuition, but she felt its gaze was intensely focused on her chest. Gister considered this, wondering aloud if that was simply how such creatures viewed human women. The reddish-haired woman conceded that in the end, nothing happened and they were safe, but they had remained on high alert. Changing the subject, she complimented Gister on her beauty and her great assets, offering her a well-paying job at her establishment. A bit taken aback, Gister wondered if that was meant as a compliment, but agreed she would ask for help later. Her mind, however, was already processing the new information. She concluded with certainty that the target was in Canaan and was drawing closer. As she walked through the town with her companions, their chatter faded into the background. A memory surfaced, triggered by the mention of a predator. A man's voice echoed in her mind, speaking to a young girl. "Come to me, Daira. You have a great talent." She recalled being 8 years old, deceived by a mentor who preyed on young girls, lured by the lie that he saw her magical potential. The memory spiraled into a vision of her hometown, ravaged and destroyed by monsters. Despite the horror she endured at the hands of others, she had trained relentlessly, pushing herself to adulthood. She remembered the crushing weight of despair, collapsed on the unforgiving ground, utterly broken. From that despair, however, a different kind of strength was born. She stood amidst the rubble, realizing in hindsight that she must have been out of her mind with grief and rage. With nothing left to matter, she became an adventurer. Deceived and violated even by her own comrades, she channeled her pain into a singular purpose, relentlessly hunting monsters, where near-death experiences became an everyday reality. Her sole motivation was a fierce determination to erase the existence of monsters from this world. It was during this relentless crusade that she met the siblings, Rena and Lizel. Having only ever joined existing teams, this was the first time she had been invited to form a new one. Lizel turned to her, his expression earnest, and asked if she would like to team up with them. Lizel recalls his initial casual attitude, thinking he could leave if he wanted. But then Gister joined their group, and a confident warrior named Gista enthusiastically asked to join as well, solidifying their new party. Together, they shared hardships and joys, surviving numerous life-or-death situations as a cohesive unit. Before long, their teamwork paid off. After a grueling battle, Lizel, bloodied but triumphant, roared that they had defeated the ogre with a magic sword. Gista, lying wounded on the ground, laughed in relief, admitting he thought he was going to die. Rena rushed to his side, urging him not to talk, as his wound was still fresh. Gister, however, looked down at the injured Lizel with a wry smile, telling him to become a man worthy of it. Lizel, still reeling, asked what they should do with a magic sword, suggesting that Gister, as the leader, should keep it. He remembers how Gista playfully asked about his potion, which Lizel admitted he'd already used. In that moment of camaraderie, Lizel realized this temporary team had become a real home for him. Yet, a shadow falls over the memory, a bitter thought that monsters always take away the things that matter most. The memory fuels Gister's resolve. She declares that the sword is proof that she once had a place to belong, and she will get it back, no matter what it takes. Her thoughts turn to Daira, who, with tears in her eyes, clasps her hands and pleads for her to make sure she returns alive. With her resolve hardened, Gister sets off through the city streets. Her long hair flows behind her as she walks with purpose, her mind fixed on a single goal. A silent promise echoes in her thoughts. Wait for me, Rena. Unos arrives in a desolate, ruined landscape, his heavy footfalls stirring the dust of shattered buildings. He reflects on his journey, having left Einhell and headed southeast toward the imperial capital as fast as he could. The scars of battle are starkly visible across the land. His relentless pace brought him to these specific ruins by sunset, the fading light casting long shadows over the destruction. He tries to identify his location amidst the rubble, surmising that this must be the town of Idres, though it is nearly unrecognizable. A jarring memory or vision flashes through his mind. The blonde elf woman, alongside another of her kind, recoiling in horror from a cataclysmic blast. She cries out in disbelief, questioning if the elves themselves were the cause of such devastation. In this memory, he stands before them, observing their unclothed state. He makes a crude, imperial-style joke to himself, considering it a fair exchange for his voyeurism. The memory fades, and he continues his journey, running tirelessly through the night. He notes the silence, joking to himself that he can hear crickets after his internal quip before giving a thumbs up to the empty darkness. His pace is relentless, a powerful, ground-eating stride that carries him through the wilderness at incredible speed. He skids to a halt, his gaze fixed on a structure looming in the distance. A sense of recognition dawns on him. It can only be one thing, the Shibaru Iron Tower. He stares up at the colossal structure, tilted precariously but unbroken against the moonlit sky, a testament to the Empire's impressive technology. He recalls a memory, a vision of 4 people, a family, standing together in a soft, ethereal light. He reflects on the special nature of visiting places that hold such family memories. His contemplation is interrupted by the sudden appearance of a horde of pale, gaunt humanoids. They swarm forward, murmuring amongst themselves, questioning what he is and where he came from. Observing the vast number of creatures, he notes their foul stench, a clear sign of their presence. He wonders aloud if their sheer quantity is due to a queen being nearby. A jagged grin spreads across his face. The timing is perfect. He declares to the now terrified horde that he is in the mood to let off some steam. As the sun rises, the aftermath is revealed. A field of carnage, littered with the dismembered and splattered remains of the entire horde. The ground is soaked and stained, a testament to the brutal efficiency of the slaughter. Leaping through the forest, he reflects that exterminating them took longer than he had anticipated. Nevertheless, he expects to see the town of Aegis soon. He stops, looking out over a cityscape. It is more ruined than he expected, and an unsettling feeling washes over him. He notes that unlike every other overgrown town he has seen, this one is gray, like ash. He surveyed the utter devastation, his gut feeling unfortunately proven correct. The entire town was nothing but ashes, completely incinerated. He wondered what could have caused such thorough destruction. Could have been the elves' magic? No. Even in a war, this level of annihilation seemed senseless. A wild guess then formed in his mind. He recalled a man in a suit discussing an ultimate weapon and considered the horrifying possibility that this was the result. It seemed entirely plausible for the Empire. If they had truly unleashed such a weapon on the imperial capital itself, the implications were staggering. Driven by this new urgency, he broke into a sprint once more. He knew he should rest, having run nonstop since leaving Einhell and even exterminating goblins along the way, but the thought was quickly dismissed. His resolve hardened. He had to get to the capital as quickly as humanly possible. He skidded to a halt. A sudden realization struck him, something he hadn't wanted to admit. Why didn't I notice it sooner? He thought to himself. He looked up, the pieces clicking into place. The truth had been right in front of him all along. Before him stretched a vast, desolate landscape. He stood at the edge of an immense crater, the true scale of the cataclysm now horrifyingly clear. Taking a step forward, his foot sank into the damp ground at the crater's edge. He knelt, feeling the texture of the ground. It was sand. A strange thought surfaced amidst the devastation. He had never been to the beach, and he wondered if this is what it felt like. He stared into the vast, empty bowl carved from the earth, contemplating the immense quantity of explosives required to create such a massive crater. This, he realized, must be the ultimate outcome of technological advancement. It was no wonder they gave up on it. This single devastating sight explained why Kanan had abandoned science entirely. His mind conjured an image of the Empire's gleaming cities, a testament to that very path. He was forced to wonder if their entire course had been a terrible mistake. With his resolve hardened, he launched himself into the sky, rocketing towards the Imperial capital. From the cover of dense foliage, the armored being known as Unos peers out, offering a cheerful, albeit unseen, greeting. His attention, however, is fixed on a specific target. He inwardly praises the form of someone he calls number 08, appreciating the view as she bends over. His lighthearted observation gives way to a grim reality. He stands in a desolate, crystalline wasteland, reflecting on the fate of the Ferlito's empire. As he expected, it has been completely annihilated, a victim of its own self-destruction. Meanwhile, in another location, 3 powerful-looking elf women confer. The one who appears to be their leader declares that with the empire gone, she must now turn her attention to investigating their greatest threat, the true form of the elves. She elaborates that this is precisely why she is conducting her observations. Even now, the scene reveals her bathing, a part of her ongoing surveillance of her own kind. The perspective returns to Unos in the bushes. He continues to admire the elves' forms, finding them beautiful, but a moment of self-awareness strikes him. He wonders if this activity is simply a way for him to run away from reality. The thought solidifies into a stark confirmation. He is, indeed, running away from reality. This realization triggers a memory of his past. As a human, he had clung to a sliver of hope, discussing a possibility with his colleagues. He had theorized that even if the empire fell, someone might survive who could continue the research on the technology needed to restore his humanity. The memory fades, leaving him standing before the vast, empty crater that was once the heart of that hope. He acknowledges grimly that this wishful thinking was crushed swiftly and completely. His mind spirals into a torrent of desperate questions. He wonders if he is doomed to this form forever, if he will be eternally alone, forever powerless. While he doesn't entirely hate his monstrous body, he admits to himself that, deep down, he still longs to be human again one day. His despair is momentarily pushed aside as his attention is recaptured by the bathing elf. A gauge materializes, illustrating his mental state shifting rapidly from overwhelmed to energetic, the sight providing a powerful, if temporary, reprieve from his existential dread. He gives thanks to a mental image of an elven woman, a goddess of breasts, believing that such fantasies are what allow him to remain sane and maintain self-control despite his circumstances. This coping mechanism stems from a dark thought. If he can never return to being human, it might be better for his mental health to simply accept his fate and see himself as a monster. Yet, as he watches the real elf from his hiding place, he suddenly feels no desire to leave. A flicker of defiance returns. He has not given up hope yet. With a renewed sense of purpose, he runs off, believing that even as a monster, he can still enjoy life as a human would to some degree. The important thing is to work toward that goal, a pursuit he admits is his greatest source of dissatisfaction. Later, this dissatisfaction manifests during a meal with his kin. The food is terrible, utterly tasteless. Unos realizes that every time he eats meat, he craves salt, but is always put off acquiring. He considers his options. The salt from the fallen empire is no good anymore. He sees no way to make a deal with anyone, leaving theft as his only choice. Reluctantly, he decides that the ban on robbery must be lifted. With his mind made up, Unos leaps into action. He has decided to head to the city of Canaan to get salt, and perhaps some spices as well. He resolves to move quickly. The scene shifts. Meanwhile, in that very city of Canaan, a man named Orlando is deeply troubled, clutching his head in extreme frustration. His distress draws a sharp rebuke from Arngale, who stands over him with a stern expression, reminding Captain Orlando that he has warned him about this before. Arngale slams a hand on the desk, shouting that Orlando needs to figure out basic literacy. Orlando weakly defends himself, stating that he can, at the very least, write his own name. His frustration boiling over, Arngale grabs Orlando by the cravat, demanding to know why he's slacking off when he's seen Lloyd and everyone else study. He leans in closer, stating that for God's sake, they don't have time, so he will just read the important parts. Orlando retorts, asking if Arngale wants to be hit, but immediately softens, apologizing and meekly declaring his affection. Their attention shifts to a report on the new species. Arngale finds it difficult to believe that the creature single-handedly destroyed the old Einhell goblin colony. Orlando, looking pensive, agrees certain it was the work of that specific being. He recalls the assessment. Its threat level was only designated disaster class because there was no major damage. In truth, the strange creature isn't at its highest level, and its appearance alone signals that more destruction is inevitable. The prospect of greater conflict brings a greedy smile to Orlando's face. He declares that when that happens, the bounty will increase, and his unit, the Daybreak Battlefield, will be the one to claim the prize. His commander's blatant avarice earns a weary sigh from Arngale, who remarks that Orlando has the word money written all over his face. Orlando laughs it off, admitting that they do still want the money. With hands on his hips, Arngale tells him he's had enough and to keep his warmongering in check. He gets back to business, explaining that their funds are draining from buying swords to combat the new species. He asks Orlando to take on some good requests to help train the new recruits, and Orlando agrees. He grows serious, however, noting that while they've strengthened their weapons, they are still critically lacking in mages, both in number and skill. He wonders if there's anywhere this isn't the case. His frustration peaks as he cries out, wondering if a beautiful, excellent mage who doesn't need money even exists, a vision of a particular woman flashing in his mind. Arngale sighs, confirming that even the kingdom of Caesarea is lacking in skilled mages. He recoils in shock as Arngale calmly states his intention to relay their conversation to a woman named Annie. Flustered, Orlando mutters to himself that a sexy woman with a large bust would be a great addition. Arngale's expression turns sly. He muses aloud, "Why indeed? Let's see," before pointedly asking Orlando why he would bring her up in the first place. The direct question sends Orlando into a flustered panic, his face contorting with stress. Arngale, enjoying the moment, brightly suggests a solution. He has heard the tavern has a bottle of 200-year-old Randile that might just wipe his memory clean. Orlando shouts in disbelief at the implied cost. At that moment, Annie herself walks in, cheerfully asking what is happening and if Orlando is treating them. Defeated, Orlando slumps over a desk, offering a hollow thank you to Arngale, who stands over him and magnanimously declares that he will treat everyone. His declaration is met with a shriek of protest from Orlando, but it is drowned out by the jubilant cheers of Annie and two other soldiers who have gathered. Annie happily confirms to the group that it seems the captain is indeed treating them. As the others celebrate, Arngale watches with a smug smile. He chides Orlando, telling him to stop adding non-stop orders because of the cost, and remarks that this is what he gets for slacking off. The monstrous, white-armored form of Unos looms into view, his sudden appearance striking terror into a group of bandits below. Their faces twist in shock and fear, letting out cries of alarm. The ground is a scene of carnage, littered with the bloodied bodies of those who try to defend their caravan. Unos observes the bandits' panicked reactions. He cannot understand their words, but their surprise at his presence is perfectly clear. His gaze widens to take in the full situation. He has just arrived in Canaan only to stumble upon this brutal attack. The coachman and guards are dead, and a blonde woman lies injured on the ground. The bandits are in disarray, shouting amongst themselves about what to do. He then notices that the woman's torn clothing reveals some kind of padding on her chest. Taking a moment to process the grim scene, he brings his hands together in a quiet prayer for the fallen, thanking them for their hard work and wishing them peace, though he keeps his other observations to himself. His brief moment of reverence is shattered when he realizes the bandits have not fled. One lunges, his sword breaking uselessly against Unos's armored form, startling the large creature. He is confused as to why they are attacking him. The bandits surround him, shouting accusations and questioning if he's a goblin leader, urging each other to attack. Having made his decision, his arm whips through the air in a powerful strike aimed at one of the aggressors. He resolves that against these bandits, he will not hold back. His fist connects with a man's head, causing it to explode in a shower of gore. He moved with brutal efficiency, ignoring the bandit screams. One of them was impaled through the chest, the force of the blow sending a spray of blood into the air. He knew it was too late for them to run. At this point, he couldn't stop himself anymore. He then launched himself through the air, a blur of white armor, as the remaining men scattered. One fell to his knees in the mud, pleading for him to stop, his face a mask of pure terror. As the bandit begged, an odd memory surfaced in his mind. A smiling, bespectacled woman in a classroom setting. He recalled her words, advice from her own mentor, suggesting one should always take the initiative to get on people's nerves. He agreed with the sentiment completely. Yes, sensei, he thought with grim finality. With this grim mantra reinforcing his actions, he brought his bladed arm down in a devastating arc, deciding that now was the time to end it. After the slaughter, his mind clarified the source of his inspiration. He was looking at an adult magazine featuring the same woman. He mused that she was his sensei to whom he was greatly indebted, before correcting himself with the thought that all of his actual teachers had been men. He stood amidst the carnage he had created, the dismembered bodies of the bandits littering the forest floor around him. He let out a guttural sound, Gafu, surveying the scene. He reflected that it was the same as always. He had gone too far. Even though they were bandits who had killed people, they were still human, and he had been unable to stop himself. He rationalized that from Canaan's perspective, it was a win-win situation, saving them the trouble of a trial. His introspection complete, he approached the caravan he had saved. He considered a large sack of salt as fair payment for dealing with the bandits. Taking it, he offered a simple, thank you for the meal. His action, however, was met with sheer terror. The survivors from the caravan began to scream, crying out that he was a monster and that they were all going to be killed. One even tried to mimic his earlier sound, perhaps as a desperate plea. Having left the caravan behind, Unos continues his journey alone, walking along a rocky path that winds through a dense forest. He is in exceptionally high spirits, a wide, joyful expression on his face, his mouth forming the shape of a heart. The source of his delight becomes clear. He has successfully obtained 2 large jars filled with salt. He sits and reflects that, Despite all the wagons, the rest of the spoils were quite disappointing. Now, having only eaten dried meat for so long, he eagerly anticipates cooking all sorts of new things with his prize. He considers the other items he took, some wool to use as cushioning for the precious salt jars, and a rather uninspired water jug. He had initially been hopeful about the jug, as it was found inside an expensive-looking box and bore an elaborate design, leading him to believe it might be some kind of magic item. However, after trying various things with it, nothing happened. His next thought was to use it simply as a water jug, but upon inspection, he was shocked to discover a hole in its base, wondering how he hadn't noticed it before. He concludes that whatever its original purpose was, it's useless to him now. He guesses it must be a decorative piece from a fountain statue, and, with that realization, tosses it aside. Lying on the ground, he considers the fragility of the glass jars. Even with the wool padding, the risk of them breaking has been a constant worry during his travels. He resolves to find a more suitable container for the salt at the Airquell shopping mall in the morning. He reflects on his recent movements, traveling back and forth between Canaan, the Empire, and Einhell. With more travel there likely in the future for various reasons, he concludes that establishing a proper base of operations within the Empire would be a convenient and strategic move. He lay on his back, contemplating the idea of a base. The more he considered it, the more brilliant it seemed. If he stocked it with essentials, it would be well worth the effort. He sat up, energized by the thought, convinced it was a truly great idea. His excitement grew, realizing it felt like building a secret hideout. The childish thrill of such a project delighted him, reminding him that he was, after all, just a guy who enjoyed such things. He began to seriously consider the logistics, focusing on a location. A spot near both Einhell and Canaan would be heavily wooded, making a poor choice. Instead, he concluded that the area north of Idris, or somewhere nearby, would be perfect. As night fell and a crescent moon rose in the sky, he finalized his plans, anticipating that the following day would be a busy one. The next day, he journeyed onward, the large salt jar on his back slowing his pace slightly. He noted his proximity to Idris and acknowledged that he had finally returned to his homeland. While walking through the dense forest, he suddenly stopped, letting out a questioning grunt as something caught his eye. He squinted, thinking he saw a color in the woods that simply shouldn't be there. Wondering if it was an artifact, he decided to move closer, as the trees obscured his view even when he tried to zoom in. His eye focused, optically zooming in on the distant anomaly. He then broke into a run, moving swiftly through the undergrowth to investigate. He crashed through the foliage, his expression shifting to one of alarm as he got a clear view. Stopping short, a cold sweat beaded on his skin. He realized that even if he wanted to avoid it, he couldn't. A dreadful possibility dawned on him as he stared at the sight before him. He had found it. There, nestled incongruously amongst the dense trees, stood a stark white building. Its clean, modern, block-like architecture was a jarring sight in the wilderness, a place that should not exist here, yet did. It was the source of his unease, a structure he recognized with a sinking dread. With heavy, determined steps, Unos approaches a modern, blocky structure nestled in overgrown foliage. A jolt of recognition runs through him. The facility looks just like the one where he first woke up. He stands amidst the wreckage of what was once a laboratory, shattered containment pods littering the floor. He had tried not to think about it, but he knew this was the place where his nightmare began. He had tried to just turn a blind eye, to ignore the truth of his origins. But now he had found it. With a powerful, resounding step, he moves toward the entrance, his resolve hardening. Meanwhile, at Karnash Fortress in former Imperial territory, Gister stands atop the battlements. She looks down at the assembled soldiers, sighing to herself at the thought of storming a major stronghold just to deal with goblins. She reflects on the fortress's history. It originally belonged to Canaan, but was occupied by the Empire for a long time. It seems she realizes that this is no ordinary fortress. A memory flashes through her mind. A chaotic battle. A monster exploding in a shower of gore amidst the fight. Back in the present, she leans against a window frame, her expression troubled. She admits to herself that she only accepted this job because the pay was good. She can't help but remember that past event, which is precisely why she hadn't wanted to come here. Her frustration erupts. It's all that monster's fault. Because he moved to Canaan, she ended up broke after having to cross the border illegally, costing her extra money. As she fumes, a familiar voice calls out from behind her, "Yo, Nachon." She turns, startled, to see her brother approaching. Gister, her expression unreadable, posed a provocative question to the soldiers before her. How much for a night? Her facade then cracked, and she let out a frustrated scream, lamenting the nature of every single one of them. She turned away from the two men, declaring that the queen was in the fortress ahead. She curtly ordered them to find somewhere else to satisfy their urges, but one of the soldiers called out, asking if she was ignoring him. As she stood silently, the soldiers conferred. One remarked on her nerve, but the other had noticed a crest on her staff, identifying her as a mage from the Kinoshita clan of Caesarea. Unimpressed, Gister simply asked if there was anything else. This revelation struck fear into the men. They knew that within the magic nation of Caesarea, the Kinoshita and Itsu clans were famously powerful. To be allowed such a name meant she possessed immense strength. One of them muttered his relief at not having been burned alive. Despite the danger, one soldier remained captivated by her appearance, remarking that her sultry face was hard to resist. His companion had to physically restrain him, telling him to get a grip. In that instant, A projectile shot from the distance, striking the distracted soldier squarely in the forehead. He was killed instantly as a shocked friend looked on. The next morning, the battle began in earnest. As the mages advanced, the second soldier was struck down, crying out for his fallen buddy in his final moments. Amidst the chaos, Gister began her incantation. With a sharp cry, she unleashed a volley of massive fireballs that soared towards the enemy fortress. The spell struck the ramparts with devastating force, erupting in a colossal explosion. As Gister exhaled, another mage watched in awe, remarking that she was in a different league and had likely already taken down 100 foes. She informs the soldier, Orlando, that she has exhausted her magic and must fall back. When he thanks her, she requests he not call her master, as the title reminds her of a contemptible figure from her past. Orlando falls silent, considering her words. She turns and walks away along a wooden platform, leaving him behind. He shouts after her, complaining that mercenaries can't be trusted because they are always looking for an easy way out. While acknowledging that running out of magic is unavoidable, his tone is one of frustration. Gister glances back, annoyed. A knight from the local army interrupts, ordering his troops to keep damage to the fortress at a minimum, as they intend to reuse it. This contradicts the simpler strategy of just setting it on fire. Gister mutters that this kind of supervision is another reason she was reluctant to take the job. She continues to grumble to herself about the nobles, reflecting that they are all the same, quick to complain without ever putting their own lives on the line. She admits to being jealous of their easy jobs. Her attention is drawn back to the battlements. Walking along the wall, she observes that the goblins have lost their momentum quicker than she expected, noting that it would have been far more troublesome if they had been equipped with the Empire's weapons. With the outer wall secured by the invading forces, the first stage of the siege concluded in what felt like the blink of an eye. By the time the main gate was opened and the rear guard pushed inside, only the Goblin Queen and a handful of her attendants were left. Orlando stands ready, his great sword raised high, preparing to face the Queen herself. With a ferocious grin, he brings the massive blade down in a powerful arc, sending a dark spray of blood splashing across the stone floor. She watches the brutal display with an expression of impressed surprise. The Goblin Queen's legs had been shattered, making her an easy target for arrows, and she quickly met her end. The battle to recapture Carnash Fortress concluded as a decisive victory. Despite being described as a hard-fought battle, the casualties were minimal, with only 5 deaths and 65 wounded. The fortress itself sustained little damage in the assault. Amidst the celebrating soldiers, one knight laughs heartily, declaring that the Lord will surely be pleased with his excellent instructions. Gister, however, looks on with disdain, muttering that he's acting high and mighty when all he did was hold them back. As she scoffs, Orlando approaches, a wide grin on his face as he praises her impressive performance. His men, however, seem to have other thoughts, fantasizing about her in a less professional capacity. He flushes, realizing the implication of his words and the atmosphere among his troops. He quickly backpedals, insisting that he was talking about her work. Gister lets out an exasperated sigh. He composes himself and formally introduces himself as Orlando, the leader of the Daybreak Battlefield group. The young blonde soldier beside him adds that his name is Lloyd, also from Daybreak. The word work finally seems to catch Gister's attention. He gets straight to the point, stating plainly that he wants to hire her. Her expression shifts from annoyance to sharp focus. She asks if he has heard the rumors about a new species of monster. He confirms her suspicions, revealing that he has a bit of a history with that very monster. Orlando explains that he expects to be called on an extermination mission soon, but his forces are lacking in the quality and number of mages. Someone with her skill would be a great help. His words catch her by surprise. The idea that he has a personal history with this creature piques her interest. Her demeanor hardens, her gaze intense. She demands that he tell her the details. A silent, blocky facility stands under a partly cloudy sky, its stark white walls surrounded by dense foliage. The structure appears abandoned, a relic of a bygone era. Inside, Uno stares at an open elevator door, sweat beading on his armored brow. He is bewildered, questioning aloud why the gate is open when it should be sealed. He recalls how he discovered this facility, having entered through a hole in the outer wall. Peering down the elevator shaft, he notes that it doesn't seem particularly deep, but his attention is caught by another hole in the shaft wall, its edges seemingly melted. His gaze shifts upward, confirming that the ceiling of the elevator car itself is also melted through. As he processes this, he examines his hand, a sudden realization dawning on him as he identifies the substance clinging to it. Threads. The connection becomes clear. This was the nesting place of the spider-like creature he had been tracking. After descending into the basement through the cramped elevator shaft, he finds another gate standing wide open before him. He pauses, his senses on high alert. From the darkness beyond, he can just barely detect the faint sound of movement. Suddenly, it all makes sense. The gate hadn't been opened from the start. The spider creature had opened it upon leaving. This could only mean one thing. The facility's power generator must still be running. His guess is confirmed as he moves deeper inside. He finds equipment actively generating a small amount of electricity using groundwater. With his theory proven correct, he proceeds to investigate what has happened. He finds a machine that still has power and extracts information from it, confident in its reliability. The fact that it's still running is a testament to the enduring quality of the Empire's technology. He assesses the old facility, noting that the power generation equipment will only last about 300 days. For now, however, it is perfect. The sturdy, underground construction makes it difficult for creatures to enter, and he can use a small amount of electricity. He decides to worry about extending the power supply later. With a triumphant gesture, he declares that this location will become the secret base of the Empire's stronghold. His mind shifts to the next task. Before settling in, he must head to a place called Islequell to retrieve some items, carefully packing a few glass bottles into his backpack. Elsewhere, an elf woman with long, light hair relaxes peacefully in a body of water. Her tranquil moment is observed by a small, white creature hiding in the bushes, who internally states its sole purpose for being there is to check on the elves. The elf woman, however, notices a pair of elf children nearby, sensing they are up to some mischief. Her attention is drawn by one of the elf boys, who proudly exclaims that he's caught a fish. He tosses his catch into the air for her to see, and she looks on, amazed. The playful moment takes a turn as the fish lands squarely on her head. While she's startled, another elf boy rushes up from behind and yanks away the cloth she was using as a covering. They succeed, running off with her covering while laughing triumphantly. Distressed, she cries out for them to give it back. The prank concludes with the elf woman scolding the now subdued children. From the bushes, the small white creature gives a thumbs up, thinking that their pranks are becoming more precise and that it looks forward to the next one. This entire scene was witnessed from a distance by Unos. He reflects that as someone from the Empire, he has mixed feelings, but watching them makes him realize elves aren't so different from humans. He considers that building a good relationship with them might not be so bad after all. He considers the potential benefits of forming a good relationship with the elves. Their long lifespans mean they might hold knowledge of what truly happened 200 years ago. However, he realizes there's a critical obstacle. He cannot understand their language. Deciding not to rush things, he resolves to head back to the Empire for now. The small slime creature bounces happily as he internally admits his initial reason for coming to the area was far less strategic. Meanwhile, in the Canaan Kingdom, stands the grand administrative building of Recol. Inside, Arngale reads a document, his expression growing tense and weary. He lets out a sigh at his desk when a knock sounds at the door. After he bids them enter, a man with long, braided hair steps in, asking what is wrong. The visitor, Captain Marcus of the mercenary group, Golden Ember, remarks that he could sense Arngeir's foul mood even from outside the room. Arngale confirms his suspicions, explaining that a new species extermination order has been issued. It is to be a joint operation with the local army. Marcus listens, unsurprised, noting that it has come to this after all. He questions the timing, however, thinking it too soon for such a drastic order from the kingdom. Marcus points out that based on his information, the new species has only attacked a merchant convoy, and the only casualties were bandits. Arngale reveals the true motivation, the Lord's pride. He explains that among the items the new species stole was a replica of Cease water source, a symbolic artifact intended for a new town being developed in the south. His fist trembles with rage. He fumes that the nobility doesn't care about the lives of mercenaries, sending them against an unknown enemy with insufficient information over something so trivial. Marcus notes the absurdity of the country's politics, as Arngale shouts that if the high-risk mission succeeds, the local army takes the credit, but if it fails, the mercenaries bear all responsibility. He apologizes, but Marcus holds up a hand, reassuring him not to blame himself. Despite Arngale's efforts, the mercenary captain states firmly that his group, the Golden Ember, cannot get involved in this matter. Standing before Arngale's desk, he elaborates on his decision. While he doesn't care what happens to himself, as the captain, he is responsible for the lives of the younger members. Arngale concedes that he would do the same if their roles were reversed. The captain's expression grows somber. He wishes all the mercenary groups could refuse, but participation in the operation, codenamed Daybreak, is mandatory. He reasons that since they were the only ones who have faced this new species, there is little choice in the matter. Elsewhere, news of the mandatory operation causes a stir. Two soldiers, Orlando and a spiky-haired comrade, react with disbelief. Orlando exclaims that if Daybreak is participating, then Grant from Immovable won't stay quiet, noting that Grant always tries to compete with a certain individual. Back in the office, Marcus speculates that since a certain skilled individual is involved, things might just work out after all. Arngale, however, remains unconvinced, stating flatly that he doesn't think so. He continues his thought with a world-weary sigh, remarking that as one gets older, one can't help but become more cowardly. His gaze becomes distant. He asks Arngale if what he feels could be described as the whispers of the land, explaining that although he hasn't seen it with his own eyes, he can sense its presence. That presence is, at that very moment, making its way through a dense forest, a domain beyond what humans should approach. Unos charges forward, a singular, powerful thought propelling him. With Boob's power, move forward, Unos. Unos' eyes flutter open as a voice greets him for the morning. He turns to find the elf teacher, Miss Number 06, lying beside him. She chuckles, noting that he has finally woken up, much to his complete shock. She leans in closer, teasingly pointing out that his little friend has been quite large the entire time, causing Unos to flush with embarrassment. Suddenly, he leaps from the bed with a triumphant roar, celebrating the return of his tail, his partner. He flexes joyfully, relieved to have it back. His excitement gives way to a quiet moment of realization as he looks down, muttering to himself that it all figures. He recalls the events of the previous day, remembering how he had run at full speed all the way to Urkel. The exertion was so great that he went straight to bed, realizing it was the first time his body had ever felt so completely tired. Now rested, Unos moves through a storage area, methodically gathering basic supplies: a plastic container, a scrubber, dishware, and salt. He pauses to consider the available home appliances, concluding the devices requiring a constant supply of electricity, such as a refrigerator, would likely be unusable. His gaze then falls upon a large television. He reflects on how he has always admired the idea of watching movies on such a screen, thinking that some entertainment would be nice. A practical concern immediately follows this thought, however, as he questions whether any data disks he might find would still be usable. He inspects one of the items he has gathered, a video camera. It appears to be an old piece of technology from his former world. The device sparks a shocking realization. With a video camera, he could record certain kinds of scenes, intimate scenes. An image of the elf teacher flashes through his mind. He trembles, electrified by the thought that such recordings could last forever. A smaller, more timid part of his consciousness, however, recoils, reminding him that voyeurism is a crime. His mind becomes a battlefield. An angelic voice argues that using the Empire's greatest invention for such a purpose is disingenuous and wrong. A devilish voice counters that there are no laws in Einhell against secret filming, as video cameras don't even exist there. The internal conflict is agonizing. He grits his teeth, his expression hardening with resolve. He concludes that this is a line that must never be crossed by a human being. A moment later, a joyous realization strikes him. He isn't human, so it's perfectly fine. His inner demon celebrates the clever loophole as his better angel despairs. With his moral quandary settled, he stands before a store display filled with cameras, vowing that the Empire's technological prowess will be put on display once again, albeit secretly, for the elves. He searches the shelves, but can't find what he's looking for. Consulting a catalog, he spots the perfect item, the latest model with zoom and multiple functions. His excitement fades when he realizes it's sold out and not in the backroom either. He briefly considers settling for his second choice, but immediately rejects the idea of compromising. A map reveals a new destination, Jisvaya, a town that prospered from its weapons factories and is also famous for its electronics district. Clutching a newly acquired television and disc player, he raises a fist, declaring that he will run any distance necessary in the name of lewdness. He decides to return to his base to set up the TV first, letting the matter with the goblin slide for now. He finally arrived in the town of Jisvaya, his excitement palpable as he surveyed the industrial cityscape. His expression hardened with resolve. After coming all this way, it would be a crushing disappointment if the camera wasn't here. He pleaded with fate for it to be available. His hopeful search was abruptly interrupted by a grim sight. Hanging from a traffic light was the brutalized body of a hanged orc, a stark and bloody display. Suddenly, a dark, powerful figure launched itself into his path, landing with menacing poise. The creature issued a clear warning. This was its territory, and trespassers would suffer the same fate. The creature struck with incredible speed, its kick sending Unos staggering back. He identified his opponent as a red ogre, a being whose intelligence and physique were on a completely different level, far superior to that of regular ogres. He considered that it would be a problem if this creature showed up while he was searching for the camera. Annoyed by the interruption, he squared his shoulders and accepted the challenge. Fine then, he thought, bring it on. Their fists met with a thunderous impact. Unos felt his foot slide back from the sheer force of the blow, a rare occurrence. He realized with a thrill that this was the first time he'd faced someone with this much power, someone he could finally have a proper hand-to-hand fight with. The red ogre pressed its advantage, unleashing a devastating punch that connected squarely with Unos' head, sending him reeling. He was struck again, this time by a powerful kick. As the red ogre's foot pinned him, Unos' perspective shifted. This wasn't a mere match or a battle. It was a fight to the death, and he resolved not to hold anything against his opponent for it. With this grim understanding, he retaliated. He drove his fist forward with brutal precision, punching straight through the red ogre's chest. The creature's head exploded in a shower of gore as Unos' follow-up strike connected, ending the fight instantly. He had barely dispatched one threat when another, far larger ogre-like creature loomed over him. The behemoth swung a crude, heavy club downwards with immense force. In response, Unos raised his armored forearm to intercept the crushing blow. The impact was devastating. A sickening crunch echoed as the club shattered against his arm, sending a spray of dark fluid across the ground. Despite the force of the attack, Unos stood unharmed, looking down at the corpse of his attacker, its skull caved in. He flexed his hand, remarking to himself that the blow had actually hurt, but the wound had already healed completely. He reasoned that since the creature had initiated the conflict, its fate was sealed. As his small angelic and demonic conscience figures appeared, he sat by the water's edge, pondering that with such power, he could very well be the strongest creature on land. With all future concerns needing to be addressed, Uno strode through a store, his mission clear: find a high-end video camera. He scanned the displays until his eyes landed on the perfect device, a large, professional-grade camera resting inside a glass case. His search was a success. Overjoyed, He celebrated the discovery with unrestrained glee. While he was there, he decided to also look for some movie discs, mentioning one in particular that he was eager to see. To be safe, he gathered 2 cameras of the same model and 50 blank discs for recording, satisfied that his preparations for filming were now complete. He then moved to an aisle lined with countless discs, feeling overwhelmed by the sheer number of choices available to him. His indecision vanished as his attention was captured by a curtained-off section marked with the number 18, emanating a distinct allure. As if drawn by an invisible force, Unos walked past the curtain and disappeared into the restricted area. His shopping trip concluded with a haul of 2 video cameras, 50 blank discs, and 3 movie discs. However, the final tally was far greater. 50 18 discs, all translated and delivered. Seated behind the towering stacks of his purchases, Unos attempted to explain himself. He started by saying the gravure idol he liked had switched to this field, but quickly corrected himself. He insisted it was merely a test to check if the discs were usable, claiming the genre was irrelevant. He kneels before his new acquisitions, a palpable desire to start watching immediately warring with a sense of propriety. He decides he must not hurry. It would be rude to the actress if he did not give her his full attention. With that settled, he concludes that he must eat first. Outside, over a crackling fire, a large cut of meat sizzles, which he intends to cook thoroughly before finishing it off. He then arranges the steak nicely on tableware he had picked out earlier at Urquell, and with a flourish, seasons it generously with his special seasoning, Canaan salt. The meal is complete. A Uno-style deer steak, or in simpler terms, grilled meat, glistening perfectly on the plate. Without hesitation, he digs in, taking a large, satisfying bite of the steak. He revels in the taste, exclaiming how juicy the meat is and how incredible the salt tastes. He realizes that after this, there is no going back to bland flavors. Having finished, he stands before a metal sink, giving thanks for the meal. He reflects that using spices to mask the gamey smell would likely make it even tastier. He then turns the faucet, asking an unseen audience if they noticed. Water begins to flow from the tap. His attention is fixed on this modern marvel. He points out that this facility is equipped not only with electricity, but also with running water. As he washes his plate, he remarks on what a great help this is, as he is accustomed to fetching water from the river. The Empire, he concludes, is truly impressive. He sat on the edge of his bed, the large screen before him humming to life. This was the moment. He steeled himself, a bead of sweat trickling down his armored skin. At last, the moment had come. With trembling hands, he slid a disc into the player. He noted the unusual tremor, a sign of his profound anticipation. He clasped his hands together, his gaze fixed on the case lying beside him. A desperate plea formed in his mind. Come on, please work. But nothing happened. A violent tremor ran through his body, shaking the very bed he sat on as his hope turned to agitation. The shaking continued, a physical manifestation of his growing disbelief and frustration. His mind raced, refusing to accept the outcome. No, he thought. There's no way it doesn't work, right? But the reality was undeniable. He collapsed face first onto the mattress, defeated, surrounded by the evidence of his many failed attempts. None of them had worked. He lay there, motionless, the weight of his disappointment pressing down on him. Then, a sudden, jarring thought pierced through his despair. He shot up, his eyes locking onto a nearby video camera. If the discs didn't work, did that mean the video cameras were also useless? He turns his attention to another device, a record player, hoping for a different outcome. Seeing the red light indicating it is recording, he holds a camera and pleads silently for this one, at least, to function correctly. But this attempt also ends in failure. With a roar of pure frustration, he smashes the machine with his powerful fist, the sound of crunching metal echoing his despair. He collapses in agony, questioning the Empire's supposed technological superiority. He wonders aloud why their advanced systems can't handle simple discs that have managed to survive for 200 years. Then, a new thought cuts through his anger. It might not be the discs that are faulty, but the player itself. This realization sparks a sense of urgency, and he decides he must return to Urquell immediately to investigate. He stares at one of the disc cases, the desire to try a new player burning within him. Yet, he hesitates, a wave of exhaustion and doubt washing over him. Clutching the discs to his chest, he reflects on their importance. They are not mere objects. They're the new hopes that have begun to bloom inside him, a promise of something to look forward to. The thought of losing this fragile hope is terrifying. He realizes that if it is extinguished, he might truly descend into madness. His hands clench into tight fists, a physical expression of his desperate resolve to hold onto this last shred of sanity. For now, he decides the only course of action is to sleep. He curls up, vowing that someday, when he is strong enough to endure even the potential loss of this hope, he will find a new player. As he drifts into slumber, his dreams reveal the source of his obsession, a vision of number 06 and number 08, the 2 elf women, laughing and playing together on a beach. He drifts in a state of pure bliss, the object of his obsession floating before him in the starry expanse of his mind. Yet, even in this perfect moment, a profound sorrow taints the dream. Unos is devastated by his recent experiences, but he knows he cannot remain mired in sadness forever. His attempt to distract himself at the new base proved unsuccessful. In an effort to improve his quality of life, he travels to the Canaan Highway, hoping to acquire some salt. From his hiding place among the bushes, he spots 3 wagons that appear to be stuck and show no signs of movement. He reasons that since they cannot escape, there is no need for him to remain camouflaged. He steps out into the open, his sudden appearance causing 2 men by the wagons to cry out in terror. They immediately turn and flee in a desperate panic, abandoning their cargo. He approaches the wagons, noting that with 2 still remaining, the men could have moved after all. He finds their hasty retreat odd but refreshing, and decides to help himself to their abandoned goods. His search leads him to a small sack of dried meat. As he brings it closer to inspect, he recoils from a strong, unnatural chemical smell. The strange scent triggers a sudden, dawning horror. He realizes with a jolt that he has fallen completely for some kind of trap. Just then, the thunder of approaching hooves fills the air, and a sharp, focused eye watches from a distance. The source is revealed: the Canaan Kingdom's army, arrayed for battle. A knight commander on an armored steed observes the scene, noting that the mercenaries they used as bait are now outnumbered. Surrounded, Unos quickly assessed the force arrayed against him. He had severely underestimated them. He counted at least 300, perhaps even 500 soldiers. He considered his options. Running was out of the question. It would only delay the inevitable. He had always known that his continued raids in Canaan would eventually lead to this, but he hadn't expected such a swift and massive response. He glanced at the salt pot, the reason for this entire confrontation, and wondered how to proceed. He grimaced, realizing his choices were limited. He could either go easy on them and simply fight his way out, or he could unleash his full power and massacre the entire army. No matter which path he chose, the outcome felt depressingly similar. He analyzed the repercussions. If he held back, their defeat would be a blow to the military's honor. But if he went all out, destroying an entire army single-handedly would brand him a threat not just to the nation, but to the world itself. Both scenarios demanded he crush them without mercy. Either way, he concluded with a sigh. Traveling through Canaan would become much more difficult, with heightened alerts and decreased wagon traffic. His deliberation concluded. He faced the armored ranks of the Canaan Kingdom army, their commander at the forefront. The commander pointed a gauntlet hand directly at him, their voice ringing with authority. They declared that he, the foolish monster, had fallen completely into their trap and made a grave error in turning the great Canaan Kingdom into an enemy. They promised he would regret this in hell. He listened to the theatrical declaration, a grim smile spreading across his face. The commander's speech sounded like a performance on a stage. He acknowledged to himself that he, too, had become quite aggressive. He straightened up, accepting the challenge. He would face them head-on, just as they wished, and deal with the consequences as they came. In response to his acceptance, the commander raised their arm and roared an order to the archers lined up behind them. "Don't hesitate. Shoot it." As the arrows flew, Uno stood his ground, unfazed. The commander, watching from horseback, knew that playing by the book would be boring. The arrows were unlikely to pierce his armored hide. They would have to rely on the mercenaries for the next phase of the attack. Leading the mercenary charge, a spiky-haired captain on horseback roars his challenge. Identifying Unos as a halberd user, he spurs his horse forward, shouting with excitement to see what the monster is capable of. He closes the distance, but his target begins a magic incantation. The captain realizes the monster is attempting a hit-and-run combo and vows not to let him escape. Unos, meanwhile, is surprised by the captain's unexpectedly fast move, abandoning his weapon and horse to press the attack on foot. The incantation culminates in a massive explosion that engulfs the charging mercenaries. Through the smoke, Unos and his duplicates emerge completely unscathed. He observes that the quality of the mage's attack was unimpressive, finding the lack of damage almost exciting. With a confident stance, he declares it's his turn to act. Before he can make his move, the mercenary captain bursts through the smoke, his halberd swinging in a wide arc that slices into Unos' side. The monster is shocked that the blow actually cut him, wondering if the halberd is enchanted or if its ability to return to its wielder is a special property. He concedes that this opponent will be an entertaining one. He presses his advantage, unleashing a furious flurry of strikes that Unos parries. The monster smirks, acknowledging that the mercenary group is full of battle maniacs, just as he expected. While the fight is fun, he recognizes the problem of facing so many at once and begins to consider making his exit. He sidesteps a swing and delivers a powerful, sweeping blow with his armored arm, catching the captain off guard and sending him flying. As the man tumbles away, Unos pauses, a flicker of admiration on his face for the cool maneuver his opponent just attempted. He lands hard on the dusty ground, his weapon skittering away. Pushing himself up onto one knee, the captain glares at the monster and shouts a defiant promise that he will not be allowed to escape. He stops, picks up the fallen halberd, and hurls it back with tremendous force. The weapon flies through the air and impales the captain, piercing straight through his chest and the back of his head, killing him instantly. His body slumps to the ground, lifeless. Unos stands over the fallen warrior, his posture relaxed, and issues a challenge to the stunned onlookers. Who's next? He declares that if no one comes to him, he will go to them. His challenge hangs in the air, met with silence from the surrounding forces. From the command line, the Canaanite commander roars in frustration, demanding to know what the archers and mages are doing. The commander orders them to hurry up and take down the monster. On a chaotic battlefield, Unos faces a line of enemy mages, a grim satisfaction spreading across his face. He feels that, at last, a true battle is about to begin. His confidence evaporates when three figures emerge from the fray: Orlando, Arngale, and a long-haired blonde warrior. The sight triggers a traumatic memory for Unos, causing him to recoil as Orlando greets him casually, remarking that it has been a long time. Overcome by a surge of primal fear and rage, he lunges forward, throwing a powerful punch aimed directly at Orlando. The warrior sidesteps the blow, and Unos' fist smashes into the empty space where he once stood. Orlando holds his massive sword defensively, clicking his tongue in annoyance. He correctly deduces that after their first encounter, Unos realized blocking his strikes was pointless and has now switched to a strategy of evasion. Roaring a promise to land a punch, Unos swings again with tremendous force. The blow connects with an explosive impact, but Orlando has already moved, leaving the attack to hit nothing but air. Orlando retaliates with a swift upward slash, his blade striking Unos' side. The attack startles Unos, who had let his guard down, thinking his opponents were weak. He realizes with a jolt that he was tricked into lowering his defenses. Before he can fully recover, Orlando stands his ground, demanding Unos' full attention. Soldiers of the Canaan Kingdom army swarm the area, completely encircling the monstrous warrior. Seeing the tactical advantage, Orlando calls for his archers to make ready. The command to fire is given, and Unos braces for the volley. He is baffled by the knight's terrible coordination. They are completely out of sync. As arrows fly, one clanging harmlessly off his armor, his attention is stolen by a charging figure. The blonde warrior, whom he recognizes as number 05, dashing recklessly through the friendly fire. She closes the distance with her magic sword drawn. Unos watches her approach, confused by her plan, as he knows such weapons are ineffective against him. As she nears, a confident smirk plays on her lips, and he realizes something is amiss. Instead of striking, she hurls a small vial that shatters against his chest, splashing him with a dark liquid. A moment of shock passes before the horrifying realization dawns on Unos. It's poison. He recoils as black, flame-like energy erupts from the point of impact. The poison courses through him, a foreign power spreading through his armored form while Orlando and his companions watch the effect take hold. He realizes with a jolt that a direct hit would have been catastrophic. From a distance, Orlando and the blonde female warrior observe the monster, with Orlando marveling at its ability to alter a spell's trajectory and his companion questioning how such a creature could ever be defeated. But instead of succumbing, an unexpected sensation washes over him. Recognizing the magic as belonging to the mage from earlier, a wide grin spreads across his face. He realizes this is the first time since gaining this body that he has felt such pure joy, a feeling he punctuates by smashing a Canaan soldier into the ground. Towering over the terrified ranks, he announces that playtime is over and challenges them to fight as if their lives depend on it. The soldiers, however, break formation completely, screaming in terror. Unos watches their pathetic display, his amusement souring as he realizes they are not ready to die and the fun is ending prematurely. He roars at them not to be a buzzkill, but their commander shouts to stay calm and reform are useless against the tide of panic. Unos looks on with contempt, concluding that the Canaan army is completely useless. Just as his disappointment peaks, a new figure thunders onto the battlefield. A soldier cries out the names of his lords in relief as the fully armored Canaanite commander, mounted on a warhorse, announces his arrival to assist. The commander's grand entrance fails to impress him, as the knight is immediately swarmed by his own panicked men. Dismissing the kingdom's army as finished, Unos turns his attention to another group on the field, roaring at them to stop playing around. He pauses for a moment, his armored body venting steam from the exertion. From a distance, the blonde elf woman watches the scene unfold, a bead of sweat on her brow as she takes a steadying breath. With his decision made, he lunges forward, closing the distance to the mercenaries in an instant. Seeing the monster commit, Orlando shouts that he is going in, and his companions acknowledge the order. He clashes with Orlando, who meets the charge with his greatsword. Unos understands the plan instantly. Orlando is keeping him busy while the others counter. Just as he expects, another mercenary swings a heavy blade at his side, forcing him to block as the coordinated assault begins. He endures the mercenary's coordinated assault. The blonde warrior spots an opening, shouting that she can see him as her axe strikes his armored form. Another mercenary attacks from the side, while Orlando watches with a tense expression. The flurry of attacks proves futile. In an instant, he is the only one left standing, surrounded by the fallen bodies of his attackers. A frustrated curse escapes his lips. He catches his breath, reflecting that he had been holding back. He reasons that there probably aren't many dead, and anyone who perished was simply unlucky. A cough racks his body as he wonders if the battle is finally over. That thought is immediately proven wrong. The air crackles with immense magical energy as a colossal crystalline projectile hurtles toward him, accompanied by a woman's powerful cry. The massive crystal slams into the earth just before him, shattering the ground on impact. He stares, momentarily stunned by the sheer force of the spell. The shock gives way to a cold dread. He realizes with terror how close he came to death. A direct hit from that would have certainly decapitated him. His gaze snaps toward the source of the attack, where a group of mages are collapsing from exhaustion. He is astonished, wondering how the magenta-haired woman could possibly have had so much magic left after their previous encounter. He sees that she has used up all her magic and can no longer even conceal herself. As she lies exposed on the ground, his attention is drawn to her prominent features. With the immediate threat gone, his curiosity takes over. He decides he might as well get a good look at her face. He slowly approaches the downed mage and kneels before her vulnerable form. From a distance, Orlando watches the scene unfold, a look of anguish twisting his face. He reached down, his large hand closing around the exhausted mage's chest, lifting her effortlessly. Gister gasped, caught completely off guard by the sudden, intimate grip. As she struggled in his grasp, Gister revealed she still had a trump card, a hidden magic dagger, and refused to give up. The small, pale creature at Unos's feet, however, was delighted by her resistance. It told her to stop, explaining that her struggling only made her chest bounce, which brought it immense happiness. The slime creature agreed, adding that it didn't understand Caesarian happiness. The creatures erupted in glee, finding the situation amazing. But Unos paid them no mind. A strange sense of familiarity washed over him as he held the mage. He felt certain he had seen, or rather, felt, this exact sensation somewhere before. His grip remained firm, and a faint blush spread across Gister's face as the small creature continued to stare up at her in awe. The memory was tantalizingly close, a reference to an encounter from the past. Gister's expression hardened into a glare, but it was too late. The memory clicked into place with shocking clarity. Unos's eyes widened as he finally recognized her. This was the woman from the ogre fight, the one he knew only as a paysan. In the land of Caesarea, a lone figure kneels in prayer before the altar of a grand church. She is a woman of the cloth, her hands clasped tightly as she focuses her thoughts in solemn devotion. Her prayer, however, is troubled. She thinks of her brother and Gista, overcome by a persistent, bad feeling that a bead of sweat traces down her temple. Elsewhere, a violent struggle is underway. Gister, the magenta-haired mage, is held fast in the grip of the monstrous Unos, shouting desperately for someone to protect Daira. His attention, however, is fixed on another. He sees the blonde elf, a paysan, and though he doesn't recall her face, he recognizes her prominent physique and the Caesarea language she speaks. There is no doubt in his mind that it is her. The memory of the sword, she gave him surfaces. He reasons that if she followed him all the way to Canaan, her objective must be tied to the expensive-looking blade. He then glances at the assembled Canaan knights, noting their lack of motivation. He survived his last encounter thanks to the magic potion he stole from a paysan, a debt he feels should more than cover the cost of saving her life. With that justification, Unos turns and flees into the forest, still carrying Gister, who screams for him to let her go. The knights watch him depart, one muttering in relief that sacrificing a single female mercenary is a cheap price to pay. Their captain, however, is enraged by their cowardice. He storms towards them, roaring that they were absolutely useless and ordering them to at least clean up the mess while they retreat. As she is carried away, Gister looks back in terror. A horrifying thought crosses her mind. Perhaps the creature was looking at human women with predatory desire. She screams for it to stop, convinced it plans to eat her. She struggles against her captor, her voice filled with defiance. She shouts that she will never give in to a monster and dares him to kill her if that is his intention. Her resistance ceases as Unos gently places her on the ground. She looks up at the towering, silent figure, utterly bewildered by the unexpected turn of events. As she watches him, her mind races. She concludes that she must find some kind of weapon while he appears to be distracted. Before she can act, the armored creature slowly kneels down in front of her, its massive form creating a stark contrast to her own. He opens his large hand, revealing a small, ornate sword resting in his palm. Gister stares, her expression a mixture of shock and disbelief. Unos makes a soft noise and offers the weapon to her. Hesitantly, she reaches out and takes the hilt. With the sword in hand, her confidence surges back. She brandishes it with a triumphant smirk, ready for a confrontation, but Unos remains perfectly still. To her utter astonishment, he simply turns his back and begins to walk away. Her smirk vanishes, replaced by sheer confusion as she questions what has happened. Angered by his inexplicable actions, she shouts at his retreating form, declaring that humans are not his toys. Her words fall on deaf ears. Unos continues on his path, wading into a shallow river without so much as a glance back. In the quiet of the forest, Unos sits alone on a fallen log. Before him, a small fire crackles, its flames licking at the fish he is roasting on a makeshift spit. His mind drifts away from the fire, conjuring a fond memory of the blonde elf woman. He recalls her kindness, thinking to himself how wonderful she was. The memory then shifts to the magenta-haired mage, Gister. He reflects that her presence also greatly improved his mood, though he acknowledges that she is likely heading in the opposite direction now. He touches his own monstrous face, a strange sense of admiration washing over him. He has come to understand that humanity cannot forgive an existence like his, precisely because he was once human himself. A flash of his recent battle with Gista comes to mind. He admits it was an enjoyable fight, a good workout even, but then considers how strange it is to describe a genuine battle in such terms. He clenches his armored fist, acknowledging that his power is simply too great to be forgiven. A part of him he realizes, had still been holding onto a sliver of hope. An image of a possible future forms in his thoughts, living among humans, even in his monstrous form. He pictures himself carrying a heavy log through a village as people watch. He wonders if such a future could ever truly exist. He lets out a quiet sigh, the sound barely audible over the crackling of the fire. Dismissing the thought for now, he looks up at the moonlit sky. It is time to eat. He rises to his feet with renewed purpose. As he eats, his mind shifts to strategy. He reasons that his recent battle will have undoubtedly raised the alarm, causing Canaan to strengthen its patrols and supply lines. This means he must stay away from the kingdom for a while. However, he realizes the resulting confusion in their information network presents a unique opportunity. He lands with a heavy thud under the light of a crescent moon, his mind resolved. By morning, he would make his final move. Elsewhere, under the same sky, Gister calmly holds a small, crude effigy, her expression unreadable as she examines her handiwork. In the aftermath of a recent battle, Arngale's voice cuts through the chaos. He commands his soldiers to load the seriously wounded onto the carriages, while those with minor injuries are to prepare themselves. He then turns his attention to Orlando, who is being checked on by Annie. She asks with concern if he is all right, but he waves it off, insisting his current state is nothing compared to what they had faced previously. Despite his dismissive words, Orlando's face is a mask of grim resolve. Arngale approaches, offering a measure of reassurance by noting that they had fought well and suffered far fewer deaths than he had anticipated. His attempt at comfort is met by Gista, who addresses Arngale directly. He tells him that since Arngale is smarter than him, he should already understand the situation. The meaning behind Gista's statement settles heavily in the air. Orlando's expression hardens with fury as the truth strikes him. His anger is justified by the official report. Of the 157 participants in the subjugation mission, there were 18 fatalities and 45 wounded. This unusually low casualty rate is presented as proof that their monstrous foe had not been fighting at full strength. The political maneuvering has already begun. A bandaged soldier presents a formal letter, explaining that the Knights of the Lord's army are blaming their own incompetence for the outcome. He reports that Arngale is being held responsible for the mission's failure, and all blame is being shifted onto the mercenary guild, a version of events the Lord has already accepted. The Lord, upon hearing the verdict, erupts in fury. He slams his fist down, roaring that the decision is ridiculous. He is being informed that his responsibility for engaging the new species while concealing information is deemed particularly grave, and for that, he will be punished. The soldier presenting the news considers that all vital intelligence must have been passed along. In the Canaan kingdom, Arngale contemplates the grim reality facing his organization. Since the Great War with the Empire ended, the lack of conflict has steadily eroded the mercenary guild's standing. To avoid being purged entirely, they were forced to accept the country's management, a move that has only worsened their position. His face contorts with frustration and helplessness. He knows he lacks the power to truly protect the mercenaries under his charge. His hand tightens into a fist upon his desk, the knuckles white with strain. He dreads the thought of having to deliver this news. Slumped over in defeat, he whispers an apology to Orlando. Another mercenary group is about to disappear under his watch. Elsewhere, Gister walks away from a recent encounter, a heavy sack slung over her shoulder. A bead of sweat traces its way down her temple as she glances back, admitting to herself that the more she considers the situation, the less she understands. From a distance, Unos watches her depart, a single question in his mind. What is she? She continues on her way, lost in thought. Her homeland has been plagued by monsters since ancient times, and she believed her research had given her considerable knowledge on the subject. But this creature was something else entirely. Her thoughts are interrupted as she spots a familiar pair in a bustling crowd. It's Orlando, and with him, the monster. She realizes with a jolt that they both remembered her. This new species, she concludes, is abnormal in every conceivable way. The implication strikes her with force. Could its intelligence truly be so high that it can recognize individuals by face and voice alone? Later, at a lively tavern, Gister sits apart from the cheerful chatter of her companions. She stares in her drink, unable to shake her thoughts. She's never heard of a monster like that. While the memory is hazy, she reasons that Orlando, who left a much stronger impression, would be the one to focus on. Her mind races through possibilities. Could it be a demon's sword? No. She dismisses the idea almost immediately. It was defeated far too easily for that. The mystery of the creature only deepens, leaving her in a state of profound confusion. Her investigation leads her to a shocking sight. Daira, held captive and in distress. Gister cries out her name as Daira stares in disbelief, unable to comprehend the situation. Turning away from Orlando and Arngale, she offers a simple apology. She explains that her objective is complete and that she must return to her country, adding that it would be useless to try and stop her. Orlando looks on with concern, questioning Arngale's inaction. As she departs, a determined look hardens her features. She resolves internally that she cannot allow the situation with Daira to remain as it is. Her path takes her into the darkness of a dense, rustling forest. Elsewhere, under the same night sky, Lena gazes out a window with a worried expression, whispering the word sister. into the quiet room. A sharp blow connects with Arngale's face, the impact sending his head snapping to the side. He recovers in an office, wiping a bit of blood from his lip as Gister confronts him, her face a mask of fury. She points accusingly, demanding to know what he meant when he announced their new assignment, the giant Viper subjugation mission. She continues, her voice laced with venom, explaining that this mission is a punishment. She informs him that, regrettably, he is included. Should he attempt to flee, he will be branded a fugitive. The image of a massive, dark-scaled Viper flashes, hinting at the deadly nature of their task. He, however, seems unfazed, a slight, confident smirk playing on his lips. He remarks coolly that returning to his mother country now would indeed be difficult. Her composure shatters completely. Gister roars in disbelief, questioning if this is truly a punishment. She argues that a disaster-class subjugation mission is far too severe even for someone in perfect condition, declaring it to be nothing less than a death sentence. At this, Orlando intervenes, his expression grim. He states that the responsibility should have fallen to the knight who failed to follow orders. He then turns his gaze away, speaking the name Daira, with regret before lamenting that this is the current state of affairs in Canaan. He continues his grim assessment to Gister, a wry smile on his face. He lays out their options: be hunted by the country for deserting the mission, or face the other mercenaries. Either path leads to hell. At least with a monster as an opponent, he reasons, the fight is straightforward. His expression hardens into one of intense resolve. He makes a desperate plea, not to anyone in the room, but to the absent Daira, asking her to lend him her strength. Below, Gister averts her gaze, her face tight with frustration and conflict. The tense moment is interrupted by a shift in focus. A hand, belonging to Lena, gently holds two small vials filled with a clear liquid. Elsewhere, a very different scene unfolds. Uno's tears into a piece of meat with a roar of delight, exclaiming how delicious it is with the black pepper he acquired in Canaan. He notes that the pepper mill he got from Mole was a bit small, but the effort was worth it. He continues his meal over several days. On the first day, he savors a piece of pork. By the second, his enthusiasm wanes. On the third day, while the food is still good, a sense of dissatisfaction begins to set in. The feeling crystallizes into a sudden, overwhelming thought. He is sick of meat and desperately wants to eat vegetables. He reflects on this newfound craving. When he was human, he believed he could subsist on meat alone, but now that it's his only option, he finds a desire for vegetables unbearable. He wonders if his body itself is demanding them. His thoughts drift to fruits and sugar, things he could acquire in Canaan. This line of thinking inevitably leads him to the elves. However, the small slime creature corrects his assumption, pointing out that elves are not vegetarians but enjoy a balanced diet of meat and produce. He dismisses the idea of dealing with elves as impossible. He considers the Caesarea kingdom, but its farms are concentrated near the capital, making any attempt far too risky. The south is completely out of the question. He harbors a deep hatred for that region. With his other options eliminated, he resigns himself to the only viable path. It has to be Canaan. He can no longer afford to be selective. As he sprints across the plains, he recalls that the farmlands of the old empire were converted into penal colonies, a fact that might make his task easier. He had already identified several candidate sites from a detailed map, committing one to memory. He plans to scout the facility while the treasure he is guarding is asleep. His target is the first candidate site, Emerald, located north of the Furless Empire. He has now arrived at the edge of the Emerald blank zone. He reaches a rocky outcrop that serves as an observation post for monitoring elves. He considers staying there for the night to rest. However, he quickly changes his mind. He decides it's more important to secure a water source for the next supply point. He has been away from his surveillance duties for some time, and he knows it is time to move on. He recalls the carefree laughter of the blonde elf, a memory dominated by a single, frank thought about her impressive physique. Shaking off the memory, he decides it's a bit early but time to move on. Lingering is pointless if he can't conduct his surveillance. With that, he leaps from a high cliff, descending towards the river below. He lands silently and takes cover in the dense foliage along the riverbank, peering out towards the elven observation post. He remains concealed, his gaze fixed on the base, near a waterfall. The area is completely deserted. No one comes or goes. He grits his teeth in confusion, wondering what could have possibly happened. Frustrated by the lack of activity, he forces himself to calm down, reminding himself that an imperial soldier must always be composed. He concludes that perhaps it was just a coincidence that he saw them before, and decides to wait for one night. A full day passes. On the second day, there is still no sign of movement from the elves. They do not appear. The next day brings the same result. Not a single elf emerges. His patience wears thin. He resolves to wait just one more day, refusing to leave without seeing those breasts again. He must see what's going on. He begins to ponder the possibilities, stroking his chin. Could the elves have somehow detected his presence and stopped coming to the river? Or perhaps their patterns have changed for some other reason. The fact that the elf he's so interested in is the one who seems to have vanished is the most perplexing part. He considers that there's nothing he can do for Einherjar, and his surveillance mission is on hold until the elves solve whatever problem they're facing. He briefly wonders if this is a good thing. He dismisses the thought, deciding it's a temporary situation and they will surely meet again. For now, he must focus on his current objective, vegetables. With renewed purpose, he turns towards Canaan, excited for the prospect of a different kind of harvest. He steeled himself for the journey, but his steps felt heavy, the travel taking longer than anticipated. His hunger gnawed at him. The first candidate location had been a disappointment, but he had predicted there would be a farming village nearby. He decided he would stay for one night before proceeding. The second potential location, however, proved to be an even greater failure, revealing nothing but an empty, barren field. He consulted his notes, frustrated. There was no problem with the candidate locations themselves, but he was struggling to recall his path. He remembered a mountain to the north, but couldn't be sure if the southeast was closer. He lamented his situation, possessing a body built for combat, yet being reduced to simple reconnaissance. Recognizing that his lack of finesse was a problem that needed a swift solution, he decided to stop deliberating. For now, he would head southeast. His new path led him to the third candidate location, a village. But it was a ruined one. He moved cautiously through the silent streets. The buildings weren't completely dilapidated, and he could sense a lingering trace of life, leading him to believe the village had been abandoned only recently. His attention was drawn to a large, splintered hole in a wooden wall. Unlike the first village, this destruction wasn't the result of human conflict. It was clearly the work of a monster. He grew concerned, noting the complete absence of any signs that the villagers had fought back. He adopted a detective's mindset to analyze the scene. The sheer scale of the attack implied the creature had approached its victims unnoticed. The lack of bloodstains or the scent of decay pointed to a grim conclusion. The villagers were likely swallowed whole. He identified the probable culprit, a shadow viper. Looking over a nearby fence, he spotted the creature, a massive snake, confirming his theory. It was a monster known to possess hypnotic abilities. He wondered if it had made its lair nearby, but dismissed it as a threat. Its physical nature made it no match for him. Then his focus shifted. Beyond the monster, he saw exactly what he was looking for, a field of vegetables. His initial excitement faded. The crops were not yet mature, and the storehouse had been picked clean by rats. This location, too, was a failure. With a sigh of resignation, he realized he had no other option but to cross the mountains ahead. He pressed onward, venturing deep into a dense, unfamiliar forest. The mountain's dense foliage made movement difficult. He had expected to cross it in an instant, but the thick trees slowed his pace considerably, much to his frustration. Suddenly, he halted, his senses picking up the sound of footsteps. It wasn't just one person. He estimated at least 10, maybe more. He wondered if they were the people from the village he had just left. He tried to peer through the obstructing trees for a better look, but in his haste, he lost his footing on the uneven ground and began to tumble down a steep incline. He crashed down the slope, unable to stop his momentum. Landing in a heap at the bottom, he felt a wave of dizziness. He lamented his recent string of bad luck, realizing that his immense power wasn't enough to overcome such simple mishaps. As his vision cleared, he found himself surrounded by a large company of soldiers, with Orlando at their head. Orlando stared in disbelief. Unos, in turn, felt a surge of panic, realizing his luck had finally run out. He had been careless, never imagining he would be discovered so deep in the mountains. Orlando confronts the blonde female warrior, questioning the timing of her arrival. She coolly adjusts her choker, retorting by asking if he's approaching because he can smell Orlando on her. Nearby, Gister observes that it was a bad move, and the spiky-haired soldier emphatically agrees. As the tension builds, Unos watches from a distance. He perceives their posturing as hollow, believing they have no real intention of fighting. Concluding that threatening him is a waste of time, he steps forward, shouting for them to wait. His shout is cut short as the magenta-haired woman, Gister, suddenly materializes directly in front of him. Unos is taken aback, wondering who this magic user is. In the background, Daira calls out Gister's name, while another voice identifies the newcomer as the paysan of the demonic sword. Before he can react, she strikes him squarely in the face with her chest. The unexpected physical contact leaves Unos utterly stunned by this bizarre first encounter. Reeling from the strange greeting, Unos questions what just happened. The magenta-haired woman simply asks if he is finished. He remains perplexed, reasoning that such a human gesture should have no meaning for a monster. A sudden, panicked thought strikes him. He recoils, wondering if it's possible that this Apaysan somehow recognizes him for who he truly is. In response to his agitation, she firmly brings the butt of her staff down on his helmeted head with a solid thud, offering a sincere apology. She then steps back, using the tip of her staff to trace a glowing, serpentine shape in the air before him. Unos watches as the magical sigil takes form. He recognizes the form instantly, identifying the creature being summoned as a shadow viper. The magenta-haired woman completes the incantation with a series of precise hand gestures, her expression focused as she finalizes the spell. Her spell complete, the magenta-haired woman dispels the summoned viper. With a determined gaze, she reaches out, declaring her intention to borrow the strength of those before her. Her request is met with shock. Gista turns to Daira, questioning if she is truly serious about this course of action. Daira's expression is firm. She acknowledges that relying on an unknown monster is a terrible idea, but insists it is necessary for Unos to join them in defeating the serpent. Unos considers the proposal, concluding internally that there is no benefit in it for him. A memory of a time he helped villagers surfaces, a stark contrast to his current self-interest. He reasons that without any prior leverage, there is simply nothing to be gained. He quietly affirms his decision, murmuring that he has given up on such things. His silent refusal is broken by Orlando, who shouts at the magenta-haired woman, calling her reckless and telling her to be quiet. Unos observes the exchange, noting Orlando's surprising fluency and the peculiar nickname, a paysan, he uses for her. She ignores the interruption, her voice filled with desperation as she vows to use any means necessary to return home. A vision of Daira, her face hopeful, flashes in her mind, reinforcing the promise she is determined to keep. Her passionate plea seems to resonate with Unos. He quietly contemplates his own potential benefit in the situation. Then, without a word, he reaches out and grabs the woman by her chest, lifting her effortlessly off the ground before she can react. He holds up a small, glowing object pinched between his fingers, something he plucked from her attire. The woman stares, completely stunned. He calmly states his price, 5 magic potions. Noting her pale face, he asks if she now understands his intent and is ready to negotiate. The revelation of his intelligence shatters her understanding of monsters, leaving her trembling as her long-held beliefs crumble. His demand for 5 potions left Gister reeling. Turning to her companion, she urgently asked Edward how many vials they had. He confirmed they only possessed 2. Frustrated, Gister calculated that even with her own, they only had 3 in total. Her declaration made, she turned back to Unos, gesturing to the 3 vials on the ground between them as proof that she could not meet his price. He, however, simply revealed 2 green magic potions of his own. Pointing to them, he offered to add his 2 to her 3, proposing that this would suffice. The sight of the 5 potions now arranged in a circle on the ground left Gister speechless, her eyes wide with disbelief. With the payment complete, Unos declared their negotiation a success. He swiftly lifted Gister onto his broad shoulder as Orlando and Daira watched in astonishment. Orlando cried out Daira's name in alarm. As he held her, he mused internally on her determination, thinking that for her to accept this without resistance, this Apaysan must have true grit. He then presented her with a small, round object. She took it from his hand, her expression shifting from surprise to understanding. She accepted it, acknowledging to herself that while she had hesitated at first, she now held it with conviction. Her resolve hardened. She announced that she was Unit 7, and that serious time was now over. Perched atop Unos, she was ready for what came next. Their pact was sealed. As Unos and Gister prepared to move, Orlando stared in disbelief, muttering that it had to be a lie. The unlikely pair stood ready, a new alliance formed. The sudden alliance left their companions stunned. Daira, in particular, could not comprehend the decision, voicing that she simply didn't understand. She resolved, however, that she could not stand by and silently allow them to do as they pleased. Her unspoken frustration materialized into a direct confrontation. Orlando, flanked by a concerned Arngale and Daira, questioned Gister's choice, asking if she was truly siding with a new species. Unfazed, Gister stood beside Unos and roared back, declaring that they would give those damn knights a fight to remember. Unos reflects on his current arrangement. He is to assist the mercenary group with monster extermination in exchange for a magic potion. From the fragmented conversations he has overheard, he is slowly beginning to piece together the full scope of their situation. He observes the mercenaries marching ahead. It seems they were pushed into this seemingly pointless mission as a consequence of a failed subjugation operation. A palpable sense of gloom hangs over them, and Unos perceives this task as a form of punishment. Suddenly, the magenta-haired woman, Gister, shouts at the men, calling them damned knights and telling them to stop sulking. She declares her intent to thwart the nobles' plans by leveraging Unos' strength, vowing to crush their ambitions. He had only agreed to help in exchange for the potion, yet he finds he doesn't entirely dislike the current circumstances. A thought crosses his mind. If his unique perceptive abilities or his true nature were to be discovered, it could lead to complications. He assesses their group, noting that without their captain or the other woman who fought the Shadow Viper, their odds of success seem slim. His gaze settles on Gister. He mentally notes her striking physique, acknowledging her as a paysan. The mercenaries come to a halt in a clearing within the forest. One of them suggests it's a good place to make camp for the day. Another turns his attention toward Unos, who stand apart from the group, and asks a companion if the creature is all right. Seeing him standing motionless, Gister walks over and asks what's wrong. He turns his head slightly in response, but before he can answer, she dismissively turns and walks away. A powerful sense of malice emanates from the woman, and Unos feels a chill. He recognizes the formidable, assertive presence she projects. She glances back with a confident smirk, her internal thoughts revealing a desire to see his stoic composure break. She watched Unos walk away from the group, her expression hardening with irritation. She called out, questioning if he was trying to show off, and curtly reminded him that they were busy. 30 minutes later, he returned, carrying the carcasses of several small, boar-like creatures over his shoulder. The mercenaries stared in disbelief, one of them remarking on how incredible it was, while Gister could only watch, momentarily stunned. He had also gathered a set of tools, a large knife, a shovel, and a coil of rope, which he laid out on the ground. Gister realized with a start that he had gone hunting for boars. Her eyes widened in disbelief at the sight of the equipment. It couldn't be true, she thought, her mind racing to comprehend the sheer improbability of the situation. He worked with methodical efficiency, draining the creature's blood into the earth before hanging the carcasses to bleed out completely. He then settled on the ground to begin butchering them. He then announced to the stunned onlookers that he was draining the blood of this new species and would dig a hole to bury the contaminated soil. His preparations continued as he fashioned skewers from the meat. The mercenaries watched, amazed, one of them asking if he had truly made them himself. Their initial shock gave way to relaxed amusement. One mercenary laughed, remarking that at this point, nothing should surprise him anymore. Gister, however, was completely flustered, staring at Unos with a mixture of shock and frustration. He skillfully grilled the skewers over a fire, the meat sizzling audibly. Gister watched, her mind reeling with the realization that he was, against all odds, preparing a complete meal for them. As the aroma filled the air, the mercenaries watched with watering mouths. Gister clutched her chest, internally fuming. He was grilling the meat, and, after 10 minutes of this tantalizing display, she desperately wanted him to just give her some already. She watches dumbfounded as Unos meticulously seasons the cooking meat, grinding salt between his armored fingers. Her patience finally snaps, and she points an accusatory finger, shouting that this whole situation is utterly absurd. In response to her outburst, Unos simply offers her a freshly cooked piece of meat on a skewer. The slime creature bounces with delight nearby. Still flustered, Gister demands to know why a monster is grilling meat for them on an iron plate. She vehemently refuses the offering, shouting that she doesn't want any meat. Unfazed, Unos simply offers it again, asking if she wants more. The slime creature chimes in, explaining that Unos is seasoning the food with salt and pepper and is trying to be easy to understand by using simple words, though he seems to be acting on his own whims. Her anger gives way to a flustered blush. She finds herself strangely captivated, thinking that being allowed to touch him just because he's a monster might be an interesting proposition. Meanwhile, Orlando takes a bite of the cooked meat and comments to Annie that he'd initially thought Unos was a terrifying monster, but now sees a surprisingly friendly side to him. Annie watches him, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. The Kanan captain, however, does not share their light-hearted mood. He stares into the distance with a grim expression, lamenting that he has become useless. He recalls that their group had only managed to defeat 18 or 19 of the giant vipers. He realizes that the odds were stacked against them from the very beginning. With renewed determination burning in his eyes, he decides he must stake everything on a desperate gamble. His train of thought is interrupted by a strange sight. Unos is meticulously wiping down his armored body with a cloth. Orlando expresses his surprise at the creature disinfecting itself, and Annie wryly comments that the monster is cleaner than he is. The captain simply mutters that this was a bad idea. Unos then turns and offers the damp cloth to Gister, who recoils in shock. The idea of a monster being so concerned with cleanliness is utterly bizarre to her. She snatches the cloth from his hand, her expression a mixture of anger and confusion as she realizes it's an unused towel, offered for her benefit. Unos seems to beam with satisfaction, as if thanking her for her efforts. Her confusion deepens as Unos suddenly embraces her from behind, his grip firm. A strange sensation washes over her, leaving her momentarily breathless. Just as quickly, he releases her. He claps his hands together, a look of satisfaction on his face, and explains that the energy he couldn't replenish while on his surveillance mission is now being restored. He offers a word of thanks, leaving her completely bewildered by the bizarre turn of events. While traveling through the woods, Unos suddenly freezes, his head twitching as if sensing something. The magenta-haired woman, Gister, notices his strange behavior and asks what he is reacting to. He remains still, listening intently to a faint, slithering sound that seems to crawl through the trees, steadily growing closer. He reports that while he can't see the source, he can hear it clearly. Judging by the rustling of the trees, he estimates it's about 20 meters away and is likely a snake. Gister compliments his excellent reaction time. Elsewhere, a mercenary confronts the source, a massive shadow viper, far larger than the typical 10-meter specimens he knows. He wonders if it's a mutant. Gister then asks Unos if the magic medicine is working. The Kanan captain shouts for everyone to be on alert. Gister informs him that while she can't see or hear anything, something is definitely out there. A loud rustling sound erupts from the dense woods, confirming a presence. The unseen creature picks up speed, and Unos realizes it intends to attack with its full momentum. The mercenaries stand ready, anxiously trying to determine where the attack will come from, but the captain admits he has no idea. Suddenly, the Kanan captain spots it and screams for everyone to look up. The giant snake descends from the canopy, its jaws agape. It slams its head into the ground with devastating force, narrowly missing the mercenary captain. The mercenary captain shouts that they've lost it again. The Kanan captain orders a pursuit, telling the magic soldiers to provide illumination. Unos, however, can no longer sense its presence. Gister turns to him, remarking that while his nose is useful, she also needs his help as a truffle pick. She continues with a wicked grin, warning him that if he gets it all over himself, his punishment will be a thorough licking. Before he can react, the giant snake has coiled itself tightly around Unos' body. As the creature constricts, he wonders if Gister actually wants him to get hit. Resigned, he thinks to himself that he might as well let it happen. He remains calm within the snake's coils, musing that this was a lucky break, saving them the trouble of capturing it. He notes that the creature has made contact. Nearby, the Kanan captain expresses alarm, while magenta-haired woman prepares a spell, light gathering at the tip of her staff. His confidence is absolute. With a shout, he declares his victory is certain, and an unseen force erupts from his body, slamming into the serpent's head. The creature reels from the blow. As Unos begins to force the massive coils apart with his bare hands, the Kanan captain watches in disbelief, knowing the giant viper's constricting force is powerful enough to shatter large trees. He continues to strain against the crushing pressure, but the blonde female warrior shouts that he cannot escape. The serpent strikes, sinking its fangs deep into his shoulder and drawing a spray of dark blood. The sight of the brutal attack leaves his companions, the Kanan captain, the mercenary captain, and the blonde female warrior, frozen in stunned silence. Despite the grievous wound, Unos calmly acknowledges his objective is met. With a single, devastating punch, he obliterates the serpent's head in a shower of gore. The impact is total, reducing the creature's skull to fragments. He stands amidst the carnage, the headless body still wrapped around him. He reflects that it is reckless to challenge a giant with brute force alone, blood dripping from his wounded arm. He admits to himself that while he tried to appear composed, the snake's constricting power was far greater than he had anticipated. The creature's immense size had made the situation genuinely perilous. With the immediate threat gone, he grips the thick, scaled body, and with a final exertion of strength, snaps its spine and casts the lifeless coil aside. He carries the limp body of the mercenary captain, whose eyes flutter open as he groggily realizes he is still alive. The Kanan captain rushes forward, taking the wounded man from him and crying out in shock at his condition. His gaze shifts to the towering, silent figure of Unos. The captain realizes with a start that he has yet to learn the name of the one who saved them. He looks directly at Unos, his expression firm. He declares that for now, he will simply offer his gratitude, acknowledging that it is thanks to Unos that his men are still alive. In response, Unos turns slightly, stating that he doesn't need to be thanked simply for receiving some medicine. The captain seems taken aback, reflecting that it has been a long time since he heard the words, "thank you." He then asks Unos if he is okay, observing that his life does not appear to be in immediate danger. His business with the soldiers concluded, Unos approaches Gister. He announces that he has done what was necessary, and that it is time to collect the magic medicine in return. Gister silently offers him a small bag. He takes the offered bag and inspects its contents, confirming the presence of 3 blue vials and 2 green ones before beginning to tie it close. But before he can finish, Gister speaks up, stating there was something she forgot to do. She suddenly reaches out and grabs his large, armored hand, prompting a startled reaction from him. She brings his hand to her lips, placing a soft kiss on the back of his armored knuckles. As she pulls away, a blush spreads across her cheeks. Her hand remained on his, the moment of contact lingering between them. The gesture left Gister flustered, her face flushing as she looked away. A young woman with reddish hair watched the exchange with a pout. Unos, however, was delighted, a wide grin spreading across his face as he thought to himself that the encounter had been far more enjoyable than he'd anticipated. He then took one of the potion vials he had received and bit down on it with a sharp crunch. As he did so, Gister, now prepared for departure with her hat on and staff in hand, turned back for a final look at him. She then rejoined her companions, their figures receding into the moonlit night. Unos watched them go, a single thought echoing in his mind as he recalled her nickname, a Paysan. He found her impressive, cool even. Unos pinches his own armored cheeks, a look of pure bliss on his face. His joy stems from a successful venture. He announces to the slime creature and nearby villagers that after parting with the reserve soldiers, he returned to the imperial capital. As payment for exterminating the goblins near their village, he received a bounty of fresh vegetables. He recalls going to sleep immediately upon his return the previous day, acknowledging that 3 consecutive days of activity seems to be his limit. But with the morning sun, he is reinvigorated and ready to cook, beginning to chop the vegetables with vigor. Now clad in a chef's uniform, he stands with his arms crossed, proudly presenting the day's menu, a massive platter of stir-fried pork and vegetables. He and the slime creature take their first bites. The vegetables, coated in pork fat, are surprisingly sweet, and the meat itself tastes better than ever. He marvels that a simple seasoning of salt and pepper could produce such a deep, complex flavor. In what feels like an instant, the entire plate is licked clean. Both he and his small companion are left completely and utterly satisfied. However, his satisfaction quickly blossoms into a new craving. He yearns for more variety, for different flavors. The thought of adding sauce or ketchup consumes him, a desire for seasonings that were unique to the old empire and likely non-existent in other lands. His hunger for culinary perfection is insatiable. He muses that even if some of the empire's seasonings from 200 years ago still existed, he wouldn't have the courage to use them. But if the factories that once produced them were still operational, he could simply make them himself. A powerful realization strikes him, a thought seemingly shared by an elegantly dressed, visored woman beside him. If they don't exist, then they'll just have to make them. He considered his new ambition. While he had read countless cookbooks, the idea of creating the seasonings themselves had never occurred to him. He felt a surge of confidence, certain that books containing the methods for their creation must exist somewhere. With his purpose clear, he declared his next objective: find a cookbook with seasoning recipes. His destination would be the Alquell Mall. His journey began, leading him through the wilderness alongside a rushing stream. He soon arrived at a secluded spot in the forest, a place known to be frequented by elves. Concealing himself in the dense bushes, he confirmed he was in the right location. From his hiding place, he saw the blonde elf woman bathing. He worried that with Alquell gone, his plan might be complicated. The elf, however, seemed to be musing on another topic, remarking that while a paysan was wonderful, there was a certain something that only elves could provide, and she confirmed its existence. His mind conjured an idyllic fantasy of the bathing elves, a stark contrast to the silent, empty reality of the riverbank that actually lay before him. He grew frustrated with himself. He had considered that changing the time and place might cause issues, but the possibility that the elves simply wouldn't appear at all had never crossed his mind. The shock of their absence was profound. His shock quickly hardened into resolve. He rose and called out into the forest, challenging the absent elves, asking if they thought they could escape his watch, and vowing to find their new bathing spot. With a grunt of determination, he began to run, crashing through the undergrowth in search of his quarry. His search came to a sudden halt as he stumbled upon signs of a recent battle. A tree was scorched by magic, arrows were scattered across the ground, and another trunk bore the deep gash of sword. He analyzed the scene, concluding it wasn't a simple hunt. An elf fighting someone? It seemed unlikely that humans would pick a fight with elves, and it was unthinkable that elves would attack monsters who were supposed to be under their protection. His thoughts drifted back to a conversation with a blonde elf. She had explained that because elves were overwhelmingly powerful, their response to any monster that became a threat was simple. They would be defeated as a matter of course. Returning to the present, he remained hidden, sensing an unusual level of vigilance from the elves. He had never felt such a thing while on patrol. As the sound of footsteps grew closer, he focused, estimating their numbers to be between 15 and 18. The source of the sound came into view. A squad of elven warriors, armed with bows and wearing stern expressions, marched in formation through the woods. As they marched past his hiding spot, he noted their armor with surprise. He wondered what kind of monster could exist that the elves couldn't handle. His eyes widened in recognition as he saw the blindfolded elf, number 08, among them. He recalled his earlier intuition that a problem was brewing, and how this important figure, number 08, was being brought out. It seemed his premonition had been correct. Back in the tense present, a jolt went through him. Number 08 was looking directly at him. He felt she had sensed his presence. The realization froze him in place. She seemed terrifyingly capable, and he knew he couldn't afford a single careless move. He quickly questioned his assumption. Had she truly sensed him, or was it a coincidence that she looked this way? Perhaps she had detected his presence, but dismissed him as a non-threat. The elven contingent continued on, coming to a stop at the edge of the now silent bathing pool. But as he watched, a flicker in the corner of his eye caught his attention. The scenery itself seemed to distort for a moment. He broke into a cold sweat, realizing with a shock that something was camouflaged there, hiding in plain sight. He remained completely unseen, not a sound betraying his presence. He realized his camouflage ability surpassed even that of the shadow viper he'd encountered before. He questioned what the elves were searching for, noting that even the perceptive number 08 was unaware of him. A grim thought crossed his mind. A surprise attack under these conditions would be dangerously effective. As if summoned by his thought, the ground erupted. A thick tentacle shot out, wrapping around an unsuspecting elf warrior, whose scream was cut short as she was violently yanked away. Alerted by the commotion, the blindfolded number 08 shouted a warning. The monstrous limb dragged its victim into the dense foliage with terrifying speed. As the other elves scrambled in shock, Unos watched from his hiding spot, his immediate concern shifting to number 08's safety. More tentacles burst forth, ensnaring the elven warriors. He analyzed the attack, realizing the creature was employing a type of magic that the elves were particularly vulnerable to, making it a natural predator to their kind. Even as her comrades were overwhelmed, number 08 remained poised, her head tilted as if listening to the chaos. One of the warriors was brutally slammed against a tree trunk. The sight startled him. He couldn't believe the elves were being so easily defeated, and wondered aloud if they were receiving aid from the Imperial Army. His gaze locked onto the captured elf, held fast in the creature's grip. In that moment, he saw it. He confirmed his observation on another of the writhing tentacles. He rose slightly from his cover, his mind processing the information. It was a massive, octopus-like monster. He was baffled how a creature of its size could have remained hidden without any sound, especially since it didn't seem to possess any camouflage abilities. Then, the creature revealed its full, terrifying form, a colossal cephalopod that dwarfed the surrounding trees, its intelligent eyes glaring down as it held an elf captive high in the air. The monster suddenly flung number 08 through the air. Seeing this, he made his decision. The tentacles posed no threat to him. Rescuing number 08 was the absolute priority. He launched himself forward. He lunged forward, his armored hand closing around one of the monster's slimy tentacles. With a grunt of frustration, he declared the situation tedious and crushed the appendage in his grip, halting the elf's trajectory. Having secured her, he held the blindfolded elf close. She remained limp in his grasp as the colossal creature's other tentacles thrashed around them. Its attack thwarted for the moment. Meanwhile, from a distance, a young man with light-colored hair observed the unfolding events, his face a mask of calm concentration. His gaze then shifted, landing on a figure standing nearby, a man in a suit. A question formed in his mind. Was this his parent? His father? The man identified as his father offered a gentle smile. The young man, now emanating a strange heat, began to apologize, explaining that the elf was an enemy of the Empire. The father figure reassured him that it was all right. Still conflicted, the young man pointed out that she was specifically number 08. A hazy memory surfaces. A man in a suit, identified as a father, looks at a younger, light-haired man and thanks him. The young man turns his head away, his profile obscured by mist. The vision fades, replaced by the fiery reality of the battle. Unos clutches the blindfolded elf woman, his massive form a shield against the flames. He declares his resolve. He will fight to protect her. His declaration is met with immediate violence. The colossal octopus monster lashes out, its tentacles ensnaring them both. One sharp appendage pierces Unos' side. As the elf woman holds on, he can only think how utterly disgusting the creature is, wondering who could possibly eat such a thing. He stumbles back from the impact, confused. A dark fluid sprays from the wound, splattering across his armored form. He looks down, questioning what has happened. A drop of the fluid lands on his jagged mouth. His eyes widen in shock. The taste, it is delicious. The octopus monster seems to sense his reaction, its own hunger surging. It confirms the thought. Yes, octopus is delicious. It wants more. He glances at the concerned elf woman before his gaze drops, a predatory focus taking over. A low growl escapes him as he demands to taste more. With a furious roar, Unos declares the monster is prey. He lunges forward, his fist crashing into the creature's head, sending tentacles flying back from the sheer force of the blow. The assault becomes a frenzy. He tears into the monster's flesh, ripping and biting, driven by an insatiable hunger. He cannot be stopped. He will not stop. Reason is gone, replaced by primal instinct. Unos is lost in the act of devouring his foe, covered in its gore. His only thoughts are a repeating mantra. Delicious. So delicious. Why is this so delicious? His eyes slowly opened, the feral glow of his rampage fading as consciousness returned. He sat in a daze on the shore, surrounded by the dismembered remains of the colossal octopus monster, the ground stained black with its fluids. He looked around, confused, trying to recall the events. He questioned what he had just done, remembering only that he was trying to help number 8. Then, a fragmented memory surfaced. The octopus meat was soft and delicious. The thought echoed in his mind, a horrifying revelation. The octopus was delicious. He stared forward, aghast at his own monstrous recollection. As he grappled with this, the blindfolded elf woman cried out that it couldn't be happening. She felt her own mind slipping, convinced she was trapped in a nightmare as she collapsed to the ground. She writhed on the forest floor, desperately calling for medicine or sleep to escape the reality of what she'd witnessed. Unos, too, felt a deep wrongness in his body. He had eaten well the day before, and his activity limit was far from reached, yet something was terribly amiss. He realized the cause must be the monster he consumed. In a panic, he jammed his fingers down his throat, trying to force himself to vomit. The effort was agonizing, but he knew he had to get it out. While he struggled, the blindfolded elf woman finally succumbed to her own affliction, her body going still as she lost consciousness on the cracked earth. Far away, in a sterile, quiet room, a young man's eyes were fixed forward, his expression unreadable. He sat perfectly still in an office chair, his hands resting on the armrests, waiting. He found himself unable to move, his voice caught in his throat. He wondered if this was all just a dream. As his senses slowly returned, the distinct sound of clapping echoed around him. He looked up to see a man in a white coat standing before him, applauding slowly. The man offered his congratulations. The scientist explained with a smile that the very existence of this dream was proof that his experiment had succeeded. He promised to bestow a reward upon the young man for the good fortune of having survived. His confusion hardened into anger. He would never forget this man's face. He was the last researcher he had spoken back when he was still human. The scientist continued, explaining that this was merely an implanted visual memory. He mused that he was probably already dead by now, and therefore, there was nothing the young man could do in response. He adjusted his glasses, dismissing the question of his own mortality as unimportant. With little time to spare, he declared it was time to get to the main point. He revealed that the young man had acquired cells from either the Genetic Enhancement Soldier Project or the Chimera Project. He added his personal hope that it was from the Ultimate Organism Project, then questioned if the young man understood the implications of this. The young man's fist tightened in fury at the scientist's casual tone. The scientist, however, simply smiled and told him to see the truth with his own eyes. The vision shifted, revealing 2 grotesque, blood-soaked monsters. A horrifying realization struck him. If those creatures were once human, just like him, then he had been killing humans. As the young man reeled from the revelation, the scientist's projection noted that their time was up, turning back to him with a calm, almost cheerful demeanor. He stood before the seated young man and elaborated on his transformation, assuring him that regardless of the past, he had now become a powerful new life form. A fact the scientist personally guaranteed. His smile widened as he expressed a sincere hope that they would meet again. He explained that current technology limited the duration of their interaction. So this session had to conclude, but promised to reveal his true purpose in the next memory implant. He then casually added a horrifying thought for the young man to ponder, that he himself might have been consuming what was once human. He cruelly reassured him not to worry, as the memory of this conversation would be sealed away until the next viewing. The scientist's taunting projection vanished with a sharp glitch. The young man, his face a mask of disbelief and fury, was left to grapple with the monstrous implications of what he had just been told. A declaration is made. By the recommendation of Marius Zesset, REBORN Gardel is to be made a Miko. In a fit of rage, the blindfolded elf, known as Number 08, rips the document in two, screaming at the injustice. Her fury is directed at Marius, the woman who recommended REBORN Gardel for the position. She considers Marius a lunatic who has fallen for the man she herself was meant to be with. This animosity stemmed from a past encounter. A handsome elf man's gaze lingered on her chest, and though she made it clear she wasn't interested, he persistently pursued her, asking her to be his. She refused, but his continued advances led to this very outcome. Back in the present, Marius Zesset confronts her, demanding to know why she's so upset and accusing her of seducing that man with her large chest. The blindfolded elf, while reading, muses on how she's being blamed for her physique, noting that it's all the more vexing because Marius is a high-ranking lady. She continues her accusations, claiming that Zesset's family has a history of stealing glory from defeated tribes and that her personality is rotten. The blindfolded elf wonders aloud if this entire scheme was orchestrated just to get her out of the way. The position she has been forced into is no mere honorific. To be a Miko is to be a living sacrifice to the monster known as the Nightmare of the Forest. This creature has a bloody history. It first appeared 10 years ago as a natural enemy to the elves, killing or devouring over 1,000 of them. A year ago, the Sword Saint Schubart managed to defeat it, and it was believed he had died in the process. But the monster has now returned. Meanwhile, Schubart is revealed to be alive, but elderly and still suffering from the wounds of that last battle. With the nightmare approaching, the potential for devastation is unimaginable. It is for this very reason that the Miko exists. Marius explains that the Miko's official role is to seal her own vision, sharpening her other senses to perceive the nightmare's stealth. However, she cryptically adds that the Miko's true purpose is something else entirely. She imagined a possible future, a place far from any hope of rescue, where she would be captured and consumed by the nightmare. But that moment had not yet arrived. With a heavy heart, she began her life as a Miko in training. Though Zesset's decision had been made without her consent, she offered no resistance, unable to defy the prevailing mood. Her training proved frustrating. She was told that sealing her sight would yield great results, but she found the exercise meaningless. An instructor tested her, asking from which direction she could sense the presence of other elves. She guessed north, then southeast, then two to the west, struggling to pinpoint them. He commented that her ability to sense presences was now sufficient for a Miko. Nearby, Marius Zesset watched with a smug expression, pleased with her rival's mediocre performance. Overwhelmed, REBORN cried out in frustration, shouting that she had messed up. Later, Marius taunted her, warning her not to get ahead of herself with the subjugation plans. She then made a lewd offer to provide some service by lifting REBORN's clothes for her. Flustered, REBORN pleaded with her stop. Her patience finally broke. Known as Number 8, she clenched her fists, her face twisted in fury, as she screamed for them all to die. In what felt like no time at all, the day of the subjugation arrived. She walked among the warriors, trying to get their attention, but they ignored her attempts at flirtation. She thought them simple-minded fools for truly believing they could defeat the nightmare. She changed tactics, crying out for someone to help her, and calling to the men who were always watching her to stand up now. They walked past, unimpressed, telling her it was time to do her job. Giving up on them, she muttered that she didn't need useless men anyway. Just then, her senses flared. She detected movement from across the river, but it wasn't the sound of the nightmare she had been trained to expect. A brief surge of overconfidence washed over her. She thought she was getting the hang of this, that she would become a legend. Her pride was shattered by a tremendous, sickening noise. The nightmare had appeared. She screamed in pure terror as the warriors around her reeled in shock, caught completely off guard. She's ensnared by a thick tentacle, crying out that she didn't notice the monster's approach at all. She pleads for help from anyone, apologizing profusely for her failure. She laments that she would be more useful if she were naked, as she is quite skilled at domestic chores. As she continues her plea, explaining that she's usually good at her job, but that a life of luxury has made her soft, a powerful impact shatters the appendage holding her. A massive, white-armored figure catches her mid-fall as she wonders what just happened. He holds her securely in his arms. She asks aloud who is there, who saved her, and offers to help them in return for their aid. The rescuer, Unos, looks down at the elf who has suddenly fallen into his grasp. With a decisive grip, he pulls her close. In that moment, she declares that he must be her fated person. She immediately begins to assess him, remarking on his impressive chest. She thinks to herself that his arms are incredibly thick and hard, perhaps even too large and solid for her liking. Still held in his grasp, she asks if he is indeed her fated person, worrying that if she thinks too much about it, he might just drop her. She acknowledges that he is fighting a nightmare, but pleads for him to first take her to a safe place. In response, he gently sets her down on her feet. She is surprised that he put her down, noting that his hands were unexpectedly gentle. She concludes that he must be quite the gentleman. She thanks her fated person. She then makes a bold offer. If he truly defeats the nightmare for her, she will press her chest against him and whisper words of love into his ear. The sounds of a fierce battle echo through the trees. She wonders if the terrible scream belongs to the nightmare, questioning if her fated person is truly capable of fighting on par with such a creature. Peeking from her hiding spot, she sees the massive monster and her even larger rescuer locked in combat. She is struck by his power, realizing he is not only strong and gentlemanly, but possesses a charm that surpasses even the Sword Saint. With hearts in her eyes, she makes a decision. From this day forward, he is her husband. From a distance, a reptilian creature observes the fray. It muses that for a gentleman, the armored figure's fighting style is quite brutish, like that of a monster. It wonders aloud if it should simply overlook such a fine specimen. Meanwhile, Arsyle's excitement boils over. She declares she's had enough of being a spectator and must properly behold her future husband. With a sharp tug, she begins removing her blindfold, her eyes gleaming with heart-shaped pupils. Her decision comes as Uno's is being relentlessly battered by the octopus monster's tentacles. The massive limbs crash down upon his armored form again and again, splattering dark fluid with each devastating impact. Witnessing the sheer brutality, Arsyle's face freezes, her eyes wide with intense focus. Her mouth falls open in a silent gasp, her gaze locked on the violent spectacle. With the blindfold now completely gone, her uncovered eyes, though their appearance is obscured, seem to take in the full, overwhelming reality of the scene. A moment later, her voice emerges, calm and measured. She apologizes and asks that her previous declaration be considered null and void. In the Einher Republic, a nation composed solely of elves, the people live in harmony with the trees they have cultivated, dwelling in what are known as villages. While humans often mistakenly believe that elves do not interfere with nature, the truth is that their environment is carefully managed. For this reason, elves often refer to themselves as the guardians of the forest, an image that has been carefully constructed as a form of self-protection. This so-called republic has no king. Instead, the nation's policies are decided by the Council of Sages, a body comprised of representatives from each tribe and various departments. And so, on this day, the Council of Sages was convened in one such village. The agenda was singular and grim, the nightmare of the forest. An elderly elf with a long white mustache stroked his chin, deep in thought. He spoke aloud, noting that the number of sacrifices had reached 12. Another, thinner elder corrected him, saying that was a mistake. A third, stout elf chuckled, reminding them that the previous speaker, Aspa, had already recounted the tale of the 31st victim. The stout elf laughed heartily, adding that with Elder Ordle, the count was 13, so it wasn't a full count at all. A younger-looking councilman interjected sharply, dismissing the concern. He argued that if their numbers were dwindling, they should simply increase them. He callously suggested they secure their lineage, noting that elves begin to age after 300 and their lifespan ends around 400. More than half of the 24 representatives present were over 300 years old. The younger councilman continued his tirade, complaining that his son's wife was barren while his other son's wife had 10 children, and griping about the uselessness of the youth. Thus, a crucial meeting to determine the future of the elves had devolved into mundane chatter. With a sharp sound, the elder with the white mustache called for order, demanding they return to the topic at hand. His command drew the attention of a stern-faced woman named Manus. Her expression was grim as she observed the proceedings, thinking to herself that the situation was not good. She was addressed by the ambitious councilman, who brought the focus back to the nightmare, questioning how they could possibly counter it when their very livelihood was threatened. He proposed dispatching Schubert's forces. Another councilman hesitated, arguing they couldn't rely on Schubert for everything. Manas's fist tightened as she retorted, questioning if they were truly willing to depend on the 388-year-old Schubert to face the demon alone. She let out a frustrated sigh. There was no passion, no spirit. She wished the younger generation would try harder, but she knew it was a futile hope for those who had never experienced war. She confronts the ambitious councilman, whom she addresses as casual, demanding to know why he has created another priestess. He calmly raises a hand, assuring her that they have prepared a suitable candidate and that there is still time, so there is no need to rush to a conclusion. He elaborates that his daughter has found someone with talent, arguing that it is a welcome development for an ambitious youth to take the reins, rather than having a priestess who does nothing. Their disagreement intensifies into a silent, charged standoff. Manas internally fumes that Casual is far too selfish, while he believes that her Zesset faction, in its thirst for power, would not welcome this development. Another council member interjects, attempting to de-escalate the tension. He points out that they have managed to create some time and suggests they resume their discussion on countermeasures against the nightmare. Manas reluctantly agrees. The discussion resumes, but it quickly devolves into a series of impractical suggestions. One member notes that magic is ineffective. Others propose throwing rocks, using a ballista, a weapon dismissed as a crude human tool, or setting a trap. Listening to the useless debate, Manas pinches the bridge of her nose in frustration. She reflects on how the elves have grown completely complacent in the peace following the war with the Empire. The Council's discussion about the nightmare has made no progress in the 10 years since the threat first emerged. Her thoughts are shattered by a sudden commotion as the chamber doors are thrown open. A young messenger bursts in, shouting his apologies for the intrusion. The stout elder, startled, permits him to enter. The young elf rushes forward, his face a mask of panic as he delivers his urgent message. It is an order from the village of Lickle regarding the nightmare of the forest. He finishes his declaration, announcing to the stunned council that the death of the nightmare has been confirmed. The stout elder demands to know how this was accomplished. The messenger admits he lacks the details, but relays the core of the report. The nightmare was devoured by another monster. The news sends a shockwave through the room, and the council erupts in chaos. Members shout in disbelief, questioning how such a creature could be eaten. The stout elder confirms the report's contents. Another demands to know the messenger's identity, suspecting a mistake, while yet another worries that this simply means a new threat has emerged. Amid the uproar, a hand slams down hard upon the council table. Amidst the rising tension, Maynaz takes control, her voice steady. She declares that they must first confirm the veracity of the report. The one who wrote it must be summoned to provide a detailed account. Furthermore, she insists, if there are any witnesses who saw the monster that devoured the nightmare, they too must be brought in for questioning. Her pragmatic approach is met with caution from the ambitious councilman. He points out that they know nothing about this new monster and suggests they should wait until all the information is gathered before making any decisions. He clenches his fist, adding that while elven magic may have been useless against the nightmare, the undeniable fact remains that their great enemy is dead. Another council member murmurs in agreement, acknowledging the truth in his statement. Maynaz, however, does not share his optimism. She reflects that while this news might finally bring peace to Einher, it is hardly a situation to be taken lightly. The thought of the creature that consumed their former nemesis, a colossal, tentacled beast standing silhouetted against the moon, fills her with dread. She wonders what kind of abomination it could possibly be. Within a rocky cavern, Unos slowly pushes himself up from the ground. He feels a lingering sluggishness, but confirms to himself that he is, at least, still alive. He remains kneeling for a moment, gathering his strength. He looks down at his hands, noticing they are completely clean, and wonders if the magenta-haired woman, Gister, used a magic potion on him. She stands nearby, observing him silently. Deciding what to do next, he resolves that first, he needs to bathe. Sometime later, a trio of freshly caught fish sizzle as they roast over a crackling fire. His strength returning, Unos heartily devours the cooked fish. He notes with satisfaction that his appetite has returned, a sure sign that his body is recovering well. As he rests, his mind drifts back to the previous day's battle. The image of the colossal octopus monster fills his thoughts. He reflects that the fight was so all-consuming that he didn't have the capacity to worry about the elves at all. Survival was his only focus. Upon waking, he decides to put his surveillance mission on hold for the day and instead prioritize satisfying his hunger. He glances over to see the blindfolded elf, Arsile, sleeping soundly, with the small slime creature resting on her chest. He makes a plan. Once he returns to the imperial capital, he will eat and then get a proper night's sleep. The following day, Unos arrives in a city ravaged by conflict. Buildings stand in ruins, their windows shattered, and the streets are littered with debris. The broken sign of a bookstore hangs precariously. His expression hardens, his eyes narrowing as he surveys the widespread destruction before him. Inside the dilapidated bookstore, he finds himself surrounded by piles of adult magazines and photographs. He recognizes the pattern of this situation, realizing he's seen this kind of development before and will need to formulate a plausible excuse for his presence. He examines one of the magazines, perplexed by its exorbitant price. He speculates that the cost might be due to the search for such items being restricted to a very limited area. With a sigh of resignation, he concludes that he has no choice but to investigate further. He had been unable to find the specific cookbooks he sought in the main bookstore, but he did acquire 7 volumes of a different sort. Concluding that a library was the most logical place to find pure knowledge, he decided to search there next. He soon found a library, a rather impressive structure, but it was in a state of severe disrepair. Wary of the shattered windows and crumbling facade, he noted that he would have to tread carefully to avoid having the building collapse on him. Inside, however, the books themselves were in surprisingly good condition. The shelves were neatly organized by genre, with guide plates that would make finding his target much easier. He considered this a fortunate turn of events. He pulled a book from a shelf, but as he opened it, he saw only blank pages. For a moment, he wondered if his eyes were deceiving him. He set the thought aside, deciding to focus on the search. This was going to take some time. The search required intense concentration, his brow furrowed in effort. After some time, he had gathered his findings, 25 books related to seasonings and cooking, alongside the 7 adult magazines. He laid out the necessary equipment, but as he reviewed the texts, a difficult truth dawned on him. Making seasonings was far more complex than he had ever imagined, requiring time, effort, and ingredients like fruit for sauces. He felt a wave of exhaustion. The realization was disheartening. He slumped forward, lamenting that even the simplest recipes required ingredients he couldn't obtain. If only the imperial farms still existed. But he quickly regained his composure. while two nations still survived to the south. Seeking their help was absolutely out of the question. The High-Level Republic and the High-Lay Federation, both south of the Empire, were known as treacherous and untrustworthy. He clenched his fists, admitting he bore a deep grudge against them. His anger was rooted in history. The Empire, once bent on conquering the world, had been attacked by the elves from the west. While the Imperial forces were occupied, the two southern nations broke their treaties and invaded, plundering the recovering cities. The people were enslaved, their lives becoming mere playthings for their conquerors. He could never ask such people for help. He clenched his fist, his mind made up. How to deal with such a ruined empire was already decided. He knew for a fact that the southern part of the former empire was not safe, and it was for that very reason he had resolved to be ruthless when the time came to go there. He knew that simply averting his gaze from the devastation wouldn't change the results of what had happened. But even so, a part of him hesitated. He considered the possibility that if he were to confirm his suspicions, any remaining restraint he possessed might vanish, which could work to his advantage. His gaze fell, a grim understanding settling in. He was only maintaining his sanity because of his emotion control functions. He realized he might be standing on the very precipice of losing himself. His brooding was interrupted by Gister, who cheerfully noted that her ample assets help her get things done. Unos, pulled from his dark thought, sighed. He decided this was the last step for now. The matter of acquiring seasoning ingredients could wait a day. He tried to convince himself that he was still fine. He resolved to sort through the accumulated goods. Looking around the cluttered space, he was taken aback by how much they had gathered, musing that it resembled the spoils of a raid on a shopping mall. Panting from the effort, he emerged from a cave, the slime creature trailing behind him. He admitted to himself that he might have overexerted himself. But a moment later, he looked back with satisfaction at the neatly organized collection of items he had brought. Settling at a desk, he picked up one of the books. After moistening a finger, he carefully began to leaf through its pages. As he turned the pages, revealing risque illustrations, he wondered with surprise if he had become so absorbed in his task that he was now seeing things. He clenched his fist, a sudden realization striking him. It wasn't his imagination. His mind flashed back to that day, recalling the deep sense of unease that had lingered ever since he'd lost consciousness. He feels a new sharpness in his senses, his entire body feeling keen and responsive. Even as he runs, he can feel his physical capabilities improving, though the book he found is not as easy to flip through as he'd like. This newfound power leaves him puzzled. He wonders if he was just imagining it at first, or if overcoming the octopus monster's potent poison had somehow triggered this power-up. He considers the dramatic developments often seen in stories, where a character returns from the brink of death with dramatically improved abilities. The thought that such a thing could actually happen to him is startling. Clenching a fist, he realizes this solves his issues with clumsiness, as his already high physical specifications have been further enhanced. He reflects that with this kind of power, deploying him for mere reconnaissance seems like a waste. He is, for all intents and purposes, an ultimate weapon. His thoughts turn to the elves. After witnessing their soldiers, he had begun to think they were nothing special. He now suspects that the Empire's long-held belief in the elves' strength might be a gross overestimation. An internal council convenes within his mind. One part of him suggests that the elves might be weaker than anticipated. Another proposes infiltrating their territory to find out. A more cautious voice interjects, reminding them that the octopus monster fought without magic, meaning they have yet to witness the elves' true capabilities. The argument intensifies. One facet of his personality asserts that with his current power, he could easily counter any magic the elves might possess. Another agrees, urging that they must not let this chance slip by. A more prideful part of him declares that for an Imperial soldier to volunteer for a mere surveillance mission would be a disgrace, a sentiment that resonates with the others in a chorus of agreement. With the decision made to infiltrate the elven territory, a vision of the blindfolded elf woman, Arsile, appears in his mind. She seems to beckon him, suggesting that if they are to proceed, they might as well go to the river. He begins his mission. Despite his newfound confidence, recklessness is not an option, and he remains numerically disadvantaged. The strategy is clear. Begin with thorough reconnaissance and slowly, methodically, expand the scope of his operations. Since reconnaissance is best conducted under the cover of darkness, he decides to spend the daylight hours at his camp. He settles in to read the book he salvaged, content to wait for nightfall. He moved with caution, aware that despite his stealth, the one known as Number 8 would likely sense his presence. He resolved to make no sound as a sudden splash echoed nearby. After beginning his reconnaissance and traveling for some time, he came upon a remarkable sight. A settlement of artificial structures built seamlessly into and around enormous trees. From his concealed position, he overheard voices, confirming his suspicion that this was an elven village. He noted more conventional wooden buildings further in and pondered their purpose, deciding there was no need to rush his investigation. He took a moment to rest by a stream, reflecting on his enhanced reconnaissance capabilities and their extended duration. With his new strength, he decided to press on a little further, recalling that he had located Number 8 somewhere in this vicinity. His primary concern remained Number 8. He knew he needed to pinpoint her location quickly, yet he resolved that he had absolutely no wicked thoughts about looking upon her in such a vulnerable state, trying to convince himself this was true. On the first day of his mission, he identified the locations of 2 separate settlements. The second, discovered after a 20-minute walk, had a distinctly different feel with tighter security near the river. Though he had not yet found number 8, he considered the day's work sufficient. The second day began with him marking the settlement's positions on a crude map, admitting to himself that he was no artist. He planned his next move. Once dusk fell, he would head toward the Einhell River. Reaching the riverbank, he found the area deserted. With time to spare and a craving for fish, he plunged into the cool water. With a powerful slap of his tail against the water's surface, he attempted to stun a fish. He mused that with the octopus monster gone, the locals would likely return to their routine soon. But his hunt was cut short. A sudden, inexplicable feeling of unease washed over him. He scanned the nearby forest, but his senses detected nothing. No strange sights, sounds, or smells. Yet, the feeling that something was profoundly wrong persisted. He barely had time to process the presence before a figure burst from the tree-line. An elf, his face twisted in a manic grin, swung his staff downward with blinding speed. The weapon connected with Unos's arm, the impact echoing through the clearing as the elf demanded to know who had been there just moments before. The blow, however, had no effect. Unos stood unharmed in the water, questioning if the attack had somehow misfired. The elf on the shore seemed equally perplexed for a moment before sneering, taunting Unos that he must have a death wish. Provoked, Unos lunged from the river, splashing towards his attacker. As he charged, his body suddenly seized up, moving against his will. He realized with dawning horror that he was no longer in control. The elf on the shore erupted in maniacal laughter, gloating that his magic had worked perfectly. Unos struggled against the unseen force, cursing as he understood the initial, seemingly failed attack was actually a spell to seal his movements. From the shadows emerged another figure, an elf woman with a lace head covering, calmly smoking a pipe. She was the true puppeteer. She mockingly commented on the use of such manipulation magic, directing a bizarre insult at Unos's form. As he fought to maintain control, Unos realized his fatal error. He had been careless. Despite his resistance, his consciousness began to fade. In a tranquil, elven village, Unos materializes, disoriented and questioning his location. Nearby, a stern-faced elf woman named KAIJU watches him, her expression hardening as she recognizes him as the one who manipulated her. He feels the magic binding him dissipate, allowing him to move again. Clenching his fist, he senses it would be unwise to act rashly. KAIJU glares at him, her irritation palpable. Suddenly, his surroundings shift into a hazy, intimate space. He is now before Arsile Gardel, who greets him with a gentle smile. She acknowledges that he was brought here by magic and asks his purpose, offering to repay him for his help with her own body. The illusion shatters, returning him to the village square with KAIJU. She informs him that such magic is useless, declaring that his reality escape time has ended. She then turns to face an approaching elf man, casual. KAIJU remarks with annoyance that he finally showed up after taking his time. He coolly replies that it's convenient for him that she came when called. Behind her, Unos is taken aback by a startling realization. He can understand the elven language. He puzzles over the word convenient, wondering if it means prioritizing the capture of the nightmare over all else. Casual dismisses KAIJU's concerns, questioning if her presence is thanks to the magic Babasama used on him. He declares that manipulating Unos was worth the risk and expresses gratitude, hoping to rank up for being called Babasama to Obasama. He then addresses KAIJU directly, acknowledging her passion for research, but warning that it is a cause for concern. She retorts, demanding to know what's wrong with her concern when the nightmare monster came so close to their village. She punctuates her point by thumping Unos on the chest, claiming that if he were inside the village, all the elves would already be in his stomach. Unos internally scoffs at the idea, thinking that he doesn't eat elves and wouldn't eat something so unappetizing anyway. The scene shifts back to the vision of Arsile, who leans close to Unos. She whispers that, in another sense, she wants to be eaten. Her mind drifts into a fantasy where she thanks Casual for protecting the village, which allowed her to continue her research, leaving her with little else to do but fantasize. Casual dismisses any other considerations, his voice sharp with accusation. He declares that the outcome is irrelevant. The very act of reviving and using domination magic was a grave transgression. The word domination strikes Unos with sudden clarity. He realizes that this was the magic used on him, a power so dangerous that even its name carries weight, a forbidden art among the elves. Casual's fury erupts. He points an accusing finger, branding Unos a brute whose thirst for knowledge has disrupted the village's sacred order. He proclaims that knowledge is power, and for that reason, Unos must face judgment. A low growl rumbles in Unos's chest. He internally vows to repay the elf for the dangerous magic inflicted upon him. A chilling thought surfaces. His newfound ability to understand their language is likely just a side effect of the very spell that controlled him. His hand clenches into a fist. He considers that killing the caster might break the spell, but the thought is quickly dismissed. Losing the ability to communicate now would be a catastrophic disadvantage. He must endure. Just as the tension peaks, Arsile Gardel steps between them, a serene smile on her face. She gently chides Casual, turning his own insult back on him, and says she will handle the situation. She muses aloud that if she or another had been the one to cast the spell, it would have been done with more finesse. Turning to Karigia and Casual, she asks if they are content to let her take over. Her presence is captivating, her form exuding a gentle yet undeniable power. Karigia formally greets her as number 6, while Casual can't help but comment on her unchanged, magnificent bearing. Karigia's tone then hardens as she questions why the esteemed Fortuna is interfering, explaining that she's merely acting as a voice for the children. A sly grin spreads across Casual's face. He turns to Karigia, pointedly asking her opinion on the matter of using magic to steal a monster's consciousness. Her expression becomes troubled, her certainty wavering. He then drapes an arm over Unos' shoulder in a gesture of false camaraderie. He remarks that while some might call Unos a monster, the Harmonization Committee would likely disagree. The name hangs in the air. Its mention in this place clearly a surprise to him. He continued to explain, a smirk playing on his lips as Karigia squirmed. The organization's official name, he revealed, is the Natural Harmonization Committee, a group whose stated purpose is coexistence with monsters. However, some members took this ideology too far, attacking a goblin nest in the Empire, an incident that was later spun into a completely different story. Despite this, he clarified that most of the committee's members are simply ordinary elves who care deeply for nature. He then turned his attention fully to Karigia, admonishing her for making things so complicated. He reminded her that using forbidden magic to resurrect someone was, in itself, a grave sin. Karigia stood her ground, arguing that they couldn't simply release Unos now, as it would only stir up anxiety among the populace. She questioned if they were expected to wait for the Sages' Council to make a decision, insisting that continuing the dispute would lead to no answers. Her eyes narrowed with suspicion as she accused him of siding with Zesset. Casual paused, his expression unreadable, before turning back to her and calmly confirming her suspicion. The confirmation struck her with force. Arsile Gardel's voice suggested she could use her body to persuade the Sages' Council to get the outcome she desired. Outraged, Karigia recoiled, shouting that she would do no such thing. Arsile simply chuckled, telling her not to be so serious. Seeing the escalating tension, Casual proposed that they disperse for the time being. As the others began to move, he leaned in to say one last thing to Karigia privately. With the immediate argument settled, Arsile and Karigia stood before the silent Unos. Arsile observed that this creature, now called Argos, had subdued the Canaan Kingdom's army and mercenaries without causing injury, marking him as a true monster. She warned that he was clearly hostile to humans and must be handled with extreme care. Karigia retorted that Arsile was being meddlesome. Unos, meanwhile, processed the new information. He realized word of his actions in Canaan had already spread, and acknowledged that his new name was now Argos. She turned to him, stating that while the name might be strange, she wouldn't take it back. With a hint of annoyance at being called an old crone, she dismissed him. Go Argos. He turned and walked away without another word. For now, he decided he would have to pretend to be manipulated. He understood that this entire situation was a consequence of his own indulgence, and he would play along until the time was right. Casual observes Karigia, noting she is not a magic user and lacks a rearguard. He reflects on the political landscape, identifying the man who opposed Arsile Gardel as Zesset, a figure who wields significant authority. He assesses that Zesset's faction possesses power equivalent to that of Fortuna, number 6's clan, and internally remarks on the presence of such factions within Elven society. She then addresses Unos directly, warning him that any attempt to defy her commands will result in his body moving against his will, his actions becoming sluggish. While she admits he has been drawn into a difficult affair, she believes his capacity for language comprehension is a key advantage. Therefore, she reasons he must also understand her instructions. Her primary objective, she states, is for him to maintain this state and learn the Elvish language. As she watches him, a final, chilling thought solidifies her intentions. His purpose is temporary, and its fulfillment will signify his end. A guiding principle is stated. One must not forget that they are a part of nature. However, this ideal is contrasted with a harsh reality. While a sun-drenched forest represents pure nature, the true madness lies with dangerous ideologues who believe even monsters can be part of this harmony. Karigia stands before a group of such creatures, a grim reminder of this flawed philosophy. This belief system had tragic consequences for her. Karigia recalls how her parents were swept up by these fanatics and killed, and how she was forcibly taken on a suicidal monster survey. The memory of their coffins solidifies her resolve that such a tragedy must never happen again. She remembers joining the committee after her parents' death, but clarifies that she had no grand, noble purpose for doing so. It wasn't a calculated move to ensure her own survival. As she walks through the forest, she admits to herself that she did it simply just because. It was on that day she first thought of Argos, Unos. Returning to the present, Karigia looks towards Unos, surrounded by her fellow elf warriors. A wave of resignation washes over her as she wonders if she has simply given up on everything. Her vulnerable expression does not go unnoticed. Unos's hand twitches, and he mutters for her to stop, a hint of distress in his voice. His internal state darkens dramatically. He clutches his head as a brutal command echoes in his mind. Violate that woman. In this dark fantasy, his hand shoots out and forcefully grabs her, eliciting a startled cry. The imagined assault continues as she screams in terror, struggling against his grip. But the violence was only a delusion. Reality returns, showing Unos blushing and sweating, dismissing the intrusive thought with a sheepish, "Just kidding." KAIJU remains nearby, seemingly oblivious to the turmoil in his mind. He remained motionless as the elf commander, his face a mask of contempt, demanded to know what was wrong. The commander, calling him Argos, gave a shocking order to violate KAIJU. As KAIJU stared in disbelief, the commander sneered, dismissing the potential for such a cheap, dramatic development and taunting Unos's supposed creator. The commander then questioned if Unos was perhaps female. His subordinate quickly clarified that Unos was male, but that his partner was currently away. Throughout the exchange, Unos remained silent, his massive head bowed. Suddenly, a low rumble emanated from the armored giant. He began to speak, repeating a single phrase over and over, "Reproductive organs, reproductive organs." Hearing this, KAIJU's hand flew to her mouth, a look of horrified understanding on her face. She flushed with anger and embarrassment, exclaiming how absurd it was for a supposed sage to be unable to even distinguish between male and female. Beside her, the commander simply laughed, finding the situation deeply amusing. His laughter ceased, and the commander's expression hardened into a cold command. "Argos, kill them," he ordered. In response, Unos's massive fist clenched tightly, a low growl rumbling in his chest as he appeared to reach a decision. But instead of obeying, he brought his fist down, smashing it into the ground with devastating force. The earth cracked under the impact, stunning the elves into silence. Unos himself seemed perplexed by his own defiance, letting out a questioning sound. He then lunged forward, not to attack, but to seize the commander's leg in his powerful grip. Enraged, the elf warrior struggled, demanding to know what Unos was doing and roaring for him to release his hand. Ignoring the commander's struggles, Unos dragged his finger through the dirt, carving a message into the ground. The words became clear, language magic learning complete. "You're no longer needed." The commander's eyes widened in horror as he read the words. He knew that the domination magic was supposed to include a language comprehension effect. The terrible realization struck him. "Could it be?" he stammered, staring at the creature whose eye now swirled with an unnerving pattern. As KAIJU looked on in shock, the commander voiced the terrifying question that now hung in the air. "Were you just pretending to be dominated, so you could learn our language?" His revelation of such high intelligence sends a shockwave through the assembled elves. KAIJU, trembling on the ground, can only stammer that it's not possible, that her domination magic was supposed to be perfect. The other elves look on, stunned. The elf commander turns his cold gaze upon KAIJU. He questions her, stating that she has been used. If that's the case, he demands to know why the creature is no longer listening to her commands. He continues his condemnation, declaring that far from saving their village, she has created a monster more dangerous than the nightmare they once feared. Her foolish actions, he proclaims, will be recounted for generations to come. From his position of power, Unos looks down at the fallen elf, a cruel grin spreading across his face. He thinks to himself that her expression of utter despair and humiliation is exactly what he wanted to see. She lets out a choked gasp, her eyes wide with terror and disbelief as the full weight of her failure crashes down upon her. In response to her terror, Unos raises a massive fist, roaring for her to die. KAIJU flinches away, bracing for the final, crushing blow. His fist stops just short of her face. Internally, Unos revels in the moment, thinking how exhilarating it is and how enduring his subservience was worth it just for this. He internally gloats over his perfect revenge plan, to reveal that the domination magic was broken at the precise moment her honor hit rock bottom, all to inflict a death steeped in humiliation. It was, he concludes, a perfect success. The sudden halt of his attack leaves the other elves completely bewildered, staring in stunned silence at the bizarre scene unfolding before them. He realizes that while his revenge is complete, he must now de-escalate. It is crucial, he thinks, to make the elves understand he has no hostile intent for now. His reasoning is simple. If they become wary of him, his access to their bathing areas will be revoked, which he considers a major problem. He considered how to explain the situation. Of course, he needed to avoid making things worse for number 6, but he also felt that KAIJU had brought this upon herself. For now, his priority was dealing with the monster. As he turned his attention to the assembled elves, he found their conversation wasn't registering clearly. He wondered if this was because the old woman's control magic had been severed by her death. He paused, realizing that magic must have been helping him understand them more than he knew. The thought of having stylishly killed the old woman only to be unable to communicate afterwards struck him as incredibly lame. While he was lost in thought, the elves focused on him, their voices a blur. They seemed to be discussing interrogation and translation. Breaking away from the group, the blindfolded elf woman, Arsile Gardel, stepped forward. "I have something I want to ask you," she declared, her voice cutting through the confusion. Her expression was grave as she posed the critical question. "Why did you kill her?" At her words, a tremor ran through Unos's massive frame. He looked down at Karigia's still form on the ground, but offered no immediate answer. Arsile continued, her words now relayed through a small, turtle-like familiar. She asked if he could understand, noting his speech had become broken, and acknowledged that Karigia's treatment of him had been life-threatening. Nearby, the elf commander wondered why Unos would kill her now, when he could have done so any time after the control was broken. He reasoned Unos must have a justification that wouldn't make the elves wary. Unos shuddered, recalling the ordeal. A mental note confirmed the life-threatening danger he faced before he could resist the control effect. He hadn't been lying. He truly thought he was going to be eaten alive. Hearing the exchange, the elf commander's eyes widened with a sudden insight. He realized the control magic hadn't failed. It had been incomplete. Arsile Gardel, her arms crossed, informs Unos that she understands his reason for taking Karigia's life. However, she has one more thing she must ask him. She asks him directly why he chose to learn the Elven language. Unos internally weighs his options, realizing the gravity of his answer. He considers that saying it was to understand the elves would earn goodwill from the Harmony Committee, but could also be perceived as a threat by the general populace. He remains silent, contemplating. He reasons that any answer suggesting resistance to a threat would only raise suspicion. Furthermore, the longer he takes to think, the more suspicious he appears. He decides it's best to give a vague, dismissive answer. His eventual reply is shockingly blunt. To kill time. The elves are stunned into silence by the anticlimactic and seemingly flippant reason. An awkward silence hangs in the air. Unos internally notes their dissatisfaction, but feels he has no other answer to give. He believes his current docile behavior is the best proof that he holds no ill will toward the elves. He then asks if they can return home. She, however, has other plans. Calling him by the name Fortuna, Arsile asks where he intends to go. Internally, she decides it would be faster if he simply helped her. Her expression is firm, her decision made. Without waiting for a response, Arsile deftly leaps onto Unos's broad shoulder, settling herself there as if it were a perch. She reassures the others that she is fine. The elf commander and his subordinate watch, impressed by her lack of agitation, a trait befitting a member of the esteemed Harmony Committee. He begins to walk, carrying Arsile as the other two elves follow them into a wooded area, their destination unknown to the guards. Their path leads them to a small house. Arsile recognizes it as Karigia's home and asks Unos what he intends to do there. Unos stares at the building, his posture resolute. He held out a piece of paper, a final directive written upon it. Completely destroy research contents. Burn down the house. Turning to Arsile Gardel, he asked bluntly if she was ordering him to burn the house. She simply replied that it was a request. Arsile hesitated, her expression filled with concern. She pointed out that the house was surrounded by trees and other residences, making it too risky to simply burn it down. Despite her reservations, she made a decision. Looking from the house back to Unos, she declared that she would be the one to burn it, offering him her thanks. In an instant, the structure was engulfed in a roaring inferno, flames consuming the wood with ferocious intensity. From a distance, the elf commander and his subordinate watched the blaze. The subordinate questioned the decision, but the commander was resolute. He stated it was more dangerous to leave any reason for that creature to return, and that a fire of that magnitude was beyond their control anyway. Unos and Arsile stood together in silence, watching the house burn to the ground before them. The crackling of the flames was the only sound as they stared into the inferno, their faces illuminated by the destructive light. Arsile's mind drifted back in time. She recalled the conversation with a fellow councilman, who had callously remarked how the pitiful child who lost her parents to extremists was a convenient martyr for their cause. Arsile reflected on her own apathy towards the committee itself. She had merely used the insane ideology of coexisting with monsters to rapidly climb its ranks. Her memory continued to a heated debate where the same councilman passionately argued against her platform. He questioned whether monsters capable of coexistence even existed, declaring that without such proof, he could not support such a claim. Arsile had listened, her own motives hidden behind a placid expression. She recalled the moment her political movement began. With a serene expression, she addressed her followers, asking them to bring before her a monster, one with the capacity and will to understand the elven people. Her words ignited passion in her supporters, including a young, ambitious elf. They fervently pledged to prove that their parents' deaths were not in vain, vowing to find such a creature. For Arsile, however, it was all mere rhetoric, a carefully crafted stratagem to keep both the radical factions and the general populace at a comfortable distance. In the quiet darkness of her own mind, she admitted the truth. Such a monster did not exist. She was the one who knew best that her parents' deaths were, in fact, meaningless. Her somber realization was shattered by a presence. She looked up, her eyes locking with Unos's. He had been there listening. He must have understood. The scene shifts. Unos is now confronted by a different elf woman, her attire revealing. She steps close and asks him directly, "What is it you desire from the elves?" He offers no response, his massive form still and silent as he regards her. Seeing his lack of response, she gestures toward herself and bluntly asks, "Breasts?" She continues her provocative suggestions, adding that perhaps he also requires her buttocks and thighs. In short, her complete nudity. Unos is appalled, thinking to himself that she is the lowest of the low. After another moment of his silence, the elf woman's expression softens into a knowing smile. She leans forward and traces a message onto his armored arm with her finger. "Give me more fruit." He looks down at the words she wrote. She asks if her handwriting is too messy. After a pause, Unos simply replies, "I understand." He watches as the elf woman offers a gentle, knowing smile. She tells him they will meet again someday. With those parting words, she turns to walk away, leaving him holding a large sack of fruit. He quietly reflects on her promise to meet again. Before she can get far, a sudden, violent explosion tears through the area in front of them. A wall of fire and crumbling debris erupts, and the two of them can only stand and watch the unfold.